Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is indeed my show. Good volume and everything else works out. I hope you guys are doing well. Hope you guys are doing okay. This is Tuesday, October 7th. Apparently, it's Vladimir Putin's birthday. Congratulations. Happy birthday, Vladimir Putin in this case. Interesting news that's taking place. And a lot of these things on the show, I guess today it's going to be more domestic. We have a new guest. We're going to have, how do I pronounce his name? Angelo Giuliano. He is going to be joining at the 9 o'clock hour. We have Ted Rall. He's going to be coming on at 8. Dan Kovalik. He's going to be coming on at 8:30. And Warwick Powell. Warwick Powell is fascinating to me. He's an economist, and he talks in these very economic ways. And I know that sounds stupid. He talks in... How do I say it? I don't want to say dry, because it's not really dry. When he's explaining that stuff, he's explaining it in very technical terms. And sometimes you have to kind of probe in order to understand what those technical terms mean, because he's an economist and he's typically speaking, I would imagine, to economists, or when he's writing articles, he's writing those articles in that vein, in that context. He has been a fantastic guest on the issue of economics and economy. And I deeply appreciate him joining me. And one of the things, he wrote a new article on his Substack, America Against Itself. America Against Itself. And I thought, maybe not necessarily prescient, even though I think he has talked about this in the past before we've gotten to the kind of current point that we're at. But things seem to be accelerating, where you seem to have a situation where the president of the United States, and that seems, is literally putting military in various parts of the United States, in areas, democratic areas, that he just doesn't necessarily like. And if this is taking place within the first year, you have to think about, where is this going to end up? It's not just military. The president is being blocked by court saying, you can't do that. And your attempt to try to get around my court order is BS. You have no rationale, no reason in order to do this. In which case, the court blocked Donald Trump from pulling the National Guard from various parts of the country to send into Portland and to send into, I believe he was trying to send, there was another location he was trying to send to Chicago, I believe. That does not, however, stop the president from using things like, let's say, elements of DHS, Department of Homeland Security. Because when, what is it called, the Posse Comitatus Act, when that was put into play, the DHS didn't exist. And so, whereas there may be a limit or limits, kind of, on the president's capability of effectively militarizing the U.S. with a Gestapo force of his choosing, there is no limit for the president implementing a Gestapo force of his choosing, because those things weren't necessarily considered at the point where the act was established. I hope you get my point. So ICE, the other federal agencies that effectively have militaristic type capabilities, Trump has the capability of using those forces, marshaling those forces under the president's discretion, and sending them as a Gestapo force in state or city after city after city of his choosing. Not to mention, you also got this. Donald Trump seems to be itching to implement the Insurrection Act. And part of the problem with US law is that it requires good faith, which is why it's very important to interrogate the person who you're going to put in that office, because you would want that person to have good faith with the amount of power that that person is going to get, which is also the exact reason why I say Trump should have been put in the cage the first time around when he tried to overthrow the government of the United States. You can't allow that to pass. It's kind of like George Bush, where George Bush starts a war, gets all of these people killed, a million Iraqis killed that we don't necessarily care about, but thousands of Americans killed in that process. And we look at it, everybody knows he lied, and just move on. Okay, what does that incentivize? It incentivizes you to do it again. You've eliminated consequence from negative action. And I'm saying that is the exact same thing with Trump. Trump should have been put in a cage the first time around. That said, this is Trump recently being asked about the Insurrection Act, because again, he has no real standing to implement this. But habitual liars lie, kind of like gravity is. And he will lie his way through every bit as much as George Bush lied his way through weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
Mr. President,
What?
the Insurrection Act, under what conditions or terms would you?
Well, I'd do it if it was necessary. So far, it hasn't been necessary, but we have an Insurrection Act for a reason. If I had to enact it, I'd do that. If people were being killed and courts were holding us up, or governors or mayors were holding us up, sure, I'd do that. I mean, I want to make sure that people aren't killed. We have to make sure that our cities are safe.
Mr. President,
Only thing that's making our cities unsafe for you is you. It's you. And what's wild, his cultists would probably just agree. Basically, the fascists in the country would cheer it on. Yes, this is great. Stephen Miller and these type of cretins will be perfectly okay with this and are pushing this policy full bore. And the way that they talk about it, the way that they kind of say, oh, there's an Antifa problem. Oh, we got to get the terrorists that are in our country. Or Trump saying, I'm going to send military into various cities around the United States. And some of you who are sitting here may be ahead of that. All of that stuff is deranged. It is completely deranged. And if you add in the killings, the violence, etc., all of these things are an acceleration of degradation of this country. Full stop. I don't even know another way to even look at it. If you're looking at, for example, the inability of the political instrument to deal with real world concerns, first and foremost of any government is to keep the lights on. Basic. Very basic. The ability to pass a budget should be very basic. These are basic things. Look at the bridge in Baltimore, or the bridge that was hit. Little to no progress has been made on rebuilding that bridge. China would have built that thing in like 2 weeks. And yes, I'm being hyperbolic when I'm saying 2 weeks. I'm just pointing out that it wouldn't be several years out with little to no progress being made. The ability to build high-speed rail, the ability to ensure that your population has medical care in a way that they can actually afford, a political instrument that gives a shit about the population. These should be basic things to a government, and these are not aspects, in any real sense of the term, that a person can argue to me that I'm going to believe that argument, that are true. They don't give a shit about you, whether they're Democrats or whether they're Republicans. Neither cares. I don't get the argument that some of these cultists make. That's poor Trump. I was watching this clip with these drunken guys in a bar were screaming, well, Donald Trump is fighting for America. And it's like, oh, you poor dumb idiots. Poor dumb idiots. Donald Trump is fighting for himself, not fighting for America. And putting in military troops in the various cities around the country is just a pure provocation. And you have to wonder, why is the president doing that? And does that trickle become a flood when he's doing this in city after city after city? What is the ultimate objective of doing that? I think we're looking at this kind of proto-fascist, kleptocracy of proto-fascism, where the president has decided, I have the capability of doing it. Nobody's going to stop me from doing it. And so, yeah, I'm going to put military in these various places. And when policy comes up that all of these people are not necessarily going to like in these various locations, I'll have military on the ground in order to create this kind of, I don't know, proto-dictatorship of sorts, or this militarization directly at home, where our chickens have effectively come home to roost, where all of the force, the killing, the violence that we were exporting out to the rest of the world that we didn't care about is now at home. When you're seeing Gestapo agents shake down Americans, and I'm saying Americans, not immigrants, actual Americans, and there is no consequence at all, it's becoming a police state. And it's becoming a police state in a way that seems like a frog that's boiling, where many of these areas of society don't necessarily seem to be entirely paying attention to what the president is actually doing, or at the very least, not responding to it. There is no political opposition to Donald Trump. None. The Democrats show no political opposition at all. Hakeem Jeffries, in fact, the government is not even open, right? And what they consider to be political opposition is effectively going through the motions for shutting the government down. And Hakeem Jeffries is lamenting the fact that Donald Trump hasn't contacted them and nobody is talking to him about it. Dude. For one, you have no charisma. 2, nobody's afraid of you. 3, as a rule, Democrats are the ones that believe in keeping the government open. So if you're dependent upon the Republican Party to reopen the government, then you need to have some kind of leverage in order to get them to reopen the government, and you have none. They believe you will come crawling back to them. And I think they're probably right. There is no political opposition to Trump. So whatever he's doing in that office, wherever he sends these troops and military, you get a random court case here or there, but that doesn't necessarily stop the purview and the power of the presidency. I know that some of you actually believe the president has no power. You are out of your mind. And what we're seeing is the president exerting control and exerting power in a direct way through military force. This time, however, on Americans. My guest is here, and I'm going to bring him in to have this conversation. We are joined with the man himself, Warwick Powell. How you doing, Warwick? I know it's late, man. I'm sorry. I know it's not your fault. I mean, I know it's not my fault, but still, I always feel bad that it's so late there. You doing all right?
It's all good. Daylight saving has kicked in Australia, but where I am, we don't change our time. So
even better.
It's a little bit better for me.
Yeah, because Jeff, it was like 10 o'clock at night for Jeff. And I felt so bad for Jeff. I felt so bad. But Warwick Powell, he is adjunct professor at Queensland University. In fact, I'll just go through this. Adjunct professor, Queensland University of Technology, chairman of Smart Trade Networks group of companies. He's also president, Data Integrity and Supply Chains Association Incorporated. Warwick, you wrote several fantastic articles. And initially, I was going to bring you on to talk about the power article, meaning this inability for the U.S. to compensate for the power demands that they actually want in the society itself. But you wrote another one in the meantime that I think it's more appropriate in this moment. This was the article that you wrote. I was kind of introducing it to the audience. America Against Itself, Redux. And I'm putting this in the context of this. This is Trump. I don't know if you've seen this video. You probably have because you pay attention to this stuff all the time. But I'm going to play it once more for the audience.
Mr. President,
What?
the Insurrection Act, under what conditions or terms would you do?
Well, I do it if it was necessary. So far, it hasn't been necessary, but we have an Insurrection Act for a reason. If I had to enact it, I'd do that. If people were being killed and courts were holding us up, or governors or mayors were holding us up, sure, I'd do that. I mean, I want to make sure that people aren't killed. We have to make sure that our cities are safe.
Mr. President,
What?
Now, what's more interesting about this is why would a reporter need to ask Trump, will he implement the Insurrection Act? Nobody asks Joe Biden that. Nobody asks Obama that. Nobody asks Bill Clinton that. Nobody asks anybody else or any other president that I'm aware of. But they're asking Trump. Now, Trump has military in American cities. He's weaponizing ICE as like his own Gestapo force all throughout the United States, who is picking up Americans, not just immigrants, also just brutalizing the rights of Americans in and of itself. And recently, in a deranged, out of his mind speech where something literally seems wrong with Trump, like he seems mentally incoherent, where he's talking about putting the military, saying, hey, some of you are going to be in the cities around the United States. And then you write the article, America Against Itself. Break this down for us. Make us understand what is happening here. I think there's a part in your article where you said kleptocracy to proto-fascism. I even named the thing that. Give us a breakdown of this. What's going on?
Look, in some ways, it was my own efforts to try to understand what's happening in America. Obviously, I'm in Australia, so I'm a long way away. But what happens in America is of abiding interest to people around the world, in part because America remains an important country, both economically, militarily, and culturally. So the dynamics of the United States matters to people all over the world. So it was an attempt by me, in a sense, to get my own head around where I think things are going, or where I think things are. And in some respects, it all came together because of a few things. One was a conversation that I had with some colleagues in Texas about 3 years ago, both from the blue side and from the red side. And in separate conversations, they both said to me that the United States had become an increasingly violent society, and that they attributed much of America's plight and existential risks largely to domestic factors, and in particular, the other side, to a point where people were starting to rationalize in their own minds that it was entirely justified in the name of national existential preservation, the killing of the other side domestically. So those remarks really left a bit of an impression on me in terms of where the United States had sent, well, according to sort of people on the ground and observing what was happening, had gotten to. Obviously, we've seen in recent days the mobilization of the National Guard. We saw an unprecedented gathering of senior military figures to be lectured in effect by the President and the Secretary of War about domestic, the threat being the domestic invasion, the use of American cities as testing and training ground for the military, etc., etc., and of course the federalization of the National Guard being deployed into various cities. So that was a second lot of things. Also got some friends in the United States, in Portland and other places, who, of course, are feeling the current dynamics intensely, and I guess I reflected upon some of the conversations that I had with them. And found it very difficult, in a sense, to come to grips with. But I guess ultimately the essay that you talk about tries to put things into a little bit of a context to try to come to grips with what's going on. And the context, I guess, belies my vintage, because it reminded me of a couple of things from the early 1990s that helped me make sense of what's happening. One was a book by a guy called Wang Huning. Wang is now a member of the Standing Committee of the Central Committee of the Politburo of the Chinese Communist Party, and obviously is in the central role in the government there. But in 1990, he took a trip across America, a 6-month trip, and wrote a book called America Against America, where he outlined his observations about the paradoxes of America, a country that had accumulated incredible financial wealth and, in fact, quite a lot of material wealth. And yet, from his point of view, it had all the hallmarks of a society that was already at each other's throats: the atomization of society, the rampant individualism, the loneliness, and the loss of a sense of community, the things that actually hold people together. The other thing from the early 1990s that came to mind was a movie that I saw called The Trigger Effect. And it didn't go that, it wasn't a big box office success, perhaps because the content was a little bit dark and somber. But it was a movie about a town, a mainstream American town, where the electricity went out. And it followed a series of intertwined plots of different characters and what happened to them in the course of the days after the loss of power. Initially, everyone thought it was just a short-term blackout and everything would be okay. But as hours dragged into days, society very, very quickly fell apart, and people turned on each other, and the violence of American society came out. So I guess for me, it was that article was a way of bringing some of those threads together and trying to make some sense of where the United States seems to be presently at.
You also point out metrics of violence, like, let's say, indirect metrics that indicate something is going on with the society. You talk about the gun, the numbers of violence from the standpoint of the number of multi-person homicides. You talk about the glass, or let's say the bulletproof glass. You talk about, meaning you list several indicators of the society is getting more violent, and you can measure it, not just economically, but in real numbers of the number of people who are being killed in the society itself.
Yeah, there's something quite unhealthy, clearly, about a society that keeps, track record of mass shootings. So mass shootings are defined as shootings involving for people, as well as the perpetrator, where people are injured or killed. And there's a website which keeps track of this. Now, we've had pretty much a mass shooting on a daily basis for years. You know, that's to me is, you know, reflects the sort of comments that Wang Huning made, where there's this social anomie, people are disconnected, they feel isolated, there's a lot of anger, etc., etc. I also mentioned some statistics about the opioid crisis in America. Now,
Yes.
everyone, of course, has focused on this question of fentanyl, which is all about China, and more recently, the drug cartels, ostensibly from Venezuela. But that's right. But with, you know, blowing up ships with no evidence, you know.
Yeah.
But it seems that a 50-year war on drugs, because it's been going now for 5 decades, has simply not worked if the real objective was to reduce the sort of social and individual fallout from opioid addiction. And that means tackling questions of why it is that there are so many Americans who are addicted to opioids. So having a look at the social circumstances that gives rise to these sorts of problems, not just trying to roll out some sort of machoistic response to the supply chain. And you mentioned also the bulletproof glass demand, and that's the one to me that really is the silent signifier, because bulletproof glass is something that only wealthy people and those who own facilities are in a position to afford. And demand for bulletproof glass in the United States has been growing at about 9.5%, 10% compound annual growth rate, and is expected to continue growing at those rates for the remainder of this decade. And what does that tell you? It tells you that there are a large group of people with the means to make these sorts of self-protection decisions who are anticipating increased risks to person and property. None of these are signs of a well-balanced, functional society, and that's a worry, obviously, because a functional, well-balanced society not only is doing things that its own citizens, I think, would favour, but this loss of balance and loss of a sense of place in the world, you know, what I've called in other places this chronic sense of displacement anxiety that now runs through the American political elite and body politic, that's reverberating in not only violence inside America's borders, but in all sorts of violence external to America's borders as well. And these are symptoms of an American social settlement and political economy, some might call it the empire, corroding from the inside.
Explain, let's define a few terms. Displacement anxiety and anime. I think this is the term. I've heard Chris Hedges use that term also. Like this, it's almost like a spiritual component of a society. I have to be honest with you. People, we had this woman who was running what is her name? She was a Democrat. They used to call her a witch. She wasn't a witch. She tried to merge these things of spiritual politics, not in a religious sense, but in a sense of there's something sick in the way that we're operating that needs to be resolved. And that's not something we typically deal with in a political sense in this country. Like this idea of if there's something wrong with you, then you need to go and deal with that. We deal with the political issues. And her thing is like these things aren't indistinct from what Marianne Williamson. These things aren't indistinct from one another. These things are fused at the hip. You know, how can you have a society that's flourishing and functional if it's sick internally in the way that it's effectively operating and in the way that the people are dealing with that stuff? You pointed out fentanyl was a symptom of that, not a cause. Meaning people are doing fentanyl because something is wrong in regards to the way those people are feeling and the separation, this anxiety that they're feeling against the larger society itself. They feel displaced. They feel out of sorts or disconnected, maybe a better term for it. Explain anime to me. and explain displacement anxiety and how those things come together to create this level of violence, chaos, etc.
Look, displacement anxiety is an idea that I guess I've tended to use to describe the nation at large. And I guess more to the point refracted through the attitudes of the political elite in Washington in particular, where for the best part of 30, 35 years, there's been a view that America won the Cold War and was therefore in a position to dictate terms globally. And the United States became a unipolar hegemon that was able to call the shots. No matter where you were in the world, the United States could call the shots. It did so by being central economically, central financially, certainly central to the world culturally, particularly through the power of Hollywood. And also, I think, central, well, obviously central to the world through sheer military or hard power capabilities. The last 10 years or so has, I think, seen the realization that that position of centrality is no longer the case, that the United States is no longer central to everything. It's not to say that the United States isn't a big country and isn't influential and important, but that it's no longer at the pinnacle by itself. And a realization that that's the case, even when that realization is being resisted, because it is being resisted every day, that realization has given rise to a strong sense of displacement. And with that comes an anxiety that America is no longer in a position that it once thought it was, that it really believed that it was entitled to be, that it was either a God-given entitlement or one that was earned through whatever struggles America has gone through, or what have you. And because the United States has been what I guess I'd call decentered, there is a strong sense of emotional, cultural, and political anxiety that comes with it. So that's at this sort of macro level. But I think you're right in drawing a link between those macro anxieties and the sort of social anomie that that observers often talk about. And this goes back to, a sociologist, French sociologist, Emile Durkheim, who talked about this idea of social anomie. He pioneered the study of phenomenon like suicide, for example, as expressions of societies where people would fall through the cracks, where they were either discarded or felt left out, disconnected, unwanted, and no longer valued within a social network. And ultimately, many would take their lives as a result of that, or turn to other forms of escape, if you will, because they felt lost. So that's, the turn to opioids and those sorts of things. So this idea of a national displacement, I think, is connected to social anomie in a few ways. One is the reality that American living standards for the bottom 50% of people actually haven't improved for the past 40 to 50 years. Real wages haven't gone up at all for that group of people. There is a large group of people who feel that the transformations in the last 40 or so years have left them behind. That, and you often see this then manifest politically in ideas like, quite, in my view anyway, quite dangerous and potentially violent ideas, such as "I now feel like a stranger in my own country" views. Right, so you see a lot of that sort of displacement as well. That certain sections of society for whom the American dream has turned into a nightmare now feel like that they are no longer part of an America that they believed in. And the politics of that is to try to reclaim that, to reassert their rightful position, to make claims on the resources that they once believed that they had, to blame those who they believe took it away, etc., etc. And so you've got a society that is fraying at the edges, but it's also fraying deep in the core. Now, the other dimension of all of this, which I think is quite an interesting one, is that, and this is a paradoxical one or a contradictory one in the American cultural context, I think, from a distance anyway, and that is a combination of a long period of progressive nihilism, where this sense of civility and spirituality in a society has been stripped out, has been hollowed out, largely because people have sort of lost their sense of wonder at the world and have become fixated on the commodity, if you will, on the stories of Wall Street and the sanctification of the trading board and the flicking red lights and the candlesticks, of the reds and the greens, and all of those things have replaced this sort of deep sense of purpose and belonging. But at the same time, we've seen into that gap re-emerge a very animated sense of religiosity, but it's incredibly politicized, if you will. So it's no longer a personal endeavor, which for a long time, I guess, religion had become, much more of an individual, personal endeavor. It has again rediscovered a sense of social vitality, and it's linked to apocalyptic sort of politics, and this has all become quite intertwined, animating people in ways that is leading to an incredible amount of violence. Actually, we're seeing the anger spill over, and I think we've seen that already over the last 10 years, and all these episodes of sending in the military, of public demonstrations, of the storming of the Capitol in January 6th a few years ago. They're all expressions of these deep senses of displacement and social anomie. So these are symptoms of the hollowing out of the material foundations of the American dream, right? This is why, in material terms, and in spiritual terms, because they've come together now, there's a hollowness to everyday life, and that's no longer satisfactory for a lot of people, and easily exploited by political forces at the same time.
Oh, that is a great explanation. I guess I always look at it as a kind of ontological shock. It's like, well, we've lost our primacy. And what are we if we don't have our primacy? Do you think this had anything to do with the fall of the Soviet Union? And I know this sounds like a curveball, and I'm going to go back to the article, but having an enemy and being able to define yourself through your enemy, in a sense, kind of gives yourself purpose. And when the Soviet Union falls, the U.S. is the sole superpower. Okay, well, what are we in this globe as we stand alone as a primary force?
Look, it is easy to create a sense of shared purpose when you've got an external enemy. And I think we're starting to see that again. So as we get domestic enemy, we're also seeing a politics of, a dual politics, one of looking for the threats from within, whilst at the same time seeking to define the threats from without. Yeah. And all of that is mobilized to undergird what has essentially been an assumption of executive power over the other powers that existed in the American division of labor, the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature. And it's become quite clear that in the last 6 months or so, that the executive has pushed the boundaries and has in effect laid down the gauntlet to the other arms of the American political system and challenged them to demonstrate whether or not, in fact, they're up to it. And so far, by and large, we can see that Congress has been particularly weak, I think, from an observer's point of view. Certainly, when you listen to commentators speak of the Democratic Party, they're nothing but scathing in terms of the abject lack of direction, fortitude, and leadership. So that's a certain view that I guess I've observed about the hollowness of the Congress in the face of the challenges that are being posed to it by the executive. And I guess time will tell as to how effective the judiciary is. Obviously, we've seen federal courts make some rulings concerning the mobilization of the National Guard into Portland, but that's being challenged. There are some challenges, legal challenges now to the tariffs that have been imposed again through executive order. You know, the mobilization of the idea of national security is unprecedented in the way that this idea of national security is being conceived. Right? I mean, I'm not a legal scholar, but I suspect that the constitutional founders would have had a sense of what national security meant, which really was, I would suspect, quite a narrow view of the state coming under threat. Right. And it had to be narrowly defined because in the way that the American body politic was set up with the three arms, the aim was to have these checks and balances, which in many ways made it difficult for any single arm to do too much by itself. And but the idea that a national emergency would justify the suspension of the rule of law and those sorts of things was always narrowly understood. And but of course, President Trump is bringing a very broad understanding of what constitutes a national security imperative, justifying the actions that he's taking under, you know, various statutes. You know, how these legal cases will play out over the next little while, I think, will be very interesting to watch, and perhaps even you know, create its own existential crisis, right? Because no doubt there will be strong views about this in the United States, and depending on how the courts come down on these issues. I mean, I saw today that Elon Musk is tweeting about how if you let the judges willy-nilly, you know, make these rulings, and we've got judicial, what was the word he used? I can't remember offhand. Let me have a quick look. But it was quite an interesting observation from Musk, because, you know, what it really was saying, that's right, if any judge anywhere can block every presidential order everywhere, we do not have democracy, we have tyranny of the judiciary. And
such nonsense. I'm sorry.
And so, yeah, and so this is a real test, in a sense, of America's own sense of itself. What is it to be a constitutional republic, right? And whether or not what's happening, which I guess my own assessment or my own way of coming to grips with it is that these are sort of symptoms of deeper problems. You know, can an America come through this and address its fundamental material and spiritual and social cultural challenges in a way that perhaps brings it back closer to what most people, I think, would think of America as to what America ought to be. Look, I don't know, but you know, these are the things that I think, you know, for people who live in America, it's obviously incredibly tangible and consequential in a very in-your-face kind of way. And for us outside of America, I guess it's important because an America that has not resolved its own internal contradictions is actually a very destabilizing and potentially dangerous force within the world. And so we're all mindful of that.
Oh, we are well past that. Elon Musk needs to be deported. What a dumb statement. The reality of it is, if you and I are playing a game and you're cheating and I call you on your cheating, and after 5 times of calling you on your cheating, you're like, well, this is unfair. How do you always get, you know, your way? It's like, dude, you cheated. Every go, you've cheated. Like you're moving upon like 6 spaces or something like that. Meaning habitual liars lie. And Donald Trump is effectively lying and being called on his lies as a justification to put military, National Guard, or whatever in these various locations. The judge is saying, this is outrageous. What are you doing? You have no real justification for this. That's like if somebody said, hey, what is your legal authority to murder Venezuelans in a boat? And Elon Musk comes out and says, well, wait a minute, this is tyranny of the judiciary because they're pointing out that he has no legal authority to do it. He has no legal authority to do it. We're a country of laws. And so, yeah, Elon Musk needs to shut the hell up. God, man, I can't stand him.
Look, I think it's quite clear, and when you read the comments of people like the president's deputy chief of staff, Stephen
Miller, yeah, he's
Miller,
basically a
uh,
fascist.
and you read the comments or the speech that the president gave at the gathering of the army and generals and navy admirals, and you read the sort of comments from the minister or the secretary of war, Pete Hegseth, it's quite clear that they have a very, I guess I called in my article, a proto-fascist outlook, right?
Yes.
It's not, and I say that because I think that it is still an embryonic, emergent phenomenon, but one which is quite clearly gathering pace. And you know, I mean, I think I made the comment. I do wonder whether America is going to have its own Reichstag fire episode, which was the episode in 1933 that Hitler used to justify his usurpation of power. And you know, because he had to, you know, bring order to chaos, and you can see the sort of rhetorical mobilization around chaos, order, safety, etc., etc. Yeah. So all of this stuff is being mobilized at the moment in the name of these objectives to create a sense of national emergency, which would therefore justify a suspension of the rule of law. In other words, to declare a state of exception. So at the moment, the president is in effect declaring states of exception on a block by block basis and a tariff by tariff basis. Each occasion, he is making a declaration concerning a national emergency that warrants these actions. So it is a salami slicing, if you will, of what it means to be confronted with a national crisis or a national emergency or a security risk to the nation's own survival. And I suspect we're going to see a lot more of this over the next 6 months. And because he's testing the boundaries every time the test is being laid out, which is, does anybody dare to pull me up on this? Does anybody dare to stand up against me? You know, whether it's in his own party, and clearly there's very few, if any, who dare at the moment to call this out. And as I mentioned earlier, observers of the Democrats are sort of scratching their heads, wondering how it is that they can be so
pointless,
so hopeless.
Yeah, they are. I think part of that is the economic system, where Democrats have a deep contradiction with, let's say, their supposed political role in the country versus the economic constraints that are placed on them because of a capitalistic system. Effectively, you're supposed to be the left-leaning party in the country, and yet you're restrained from actually being a real left-leaning party. So what do you have? You just have Trump. And for the last, 8 years, Trump has been the only thing they talked about, and they lost. Meaning they put everything in, all of their chips, into this idea of Trump, and Trump still won. They're busted, meaning they've been broken politically, and they have not been able to cobble themselves back together.
And there's no constituency, is there? There's no political constituency anymore. I mean, many years ago, I was in the United States on an exchange program observing elections. In a previous life, I was heavily involved in election campaigning, polling, analyzing voter behavior, demographics, and those sorts of things. And it seemed that one of the big drivers, which I think is leading to the malaise that the body politic is in now, is that getting out the vote became increasingly difficult as people became more apathetic. And the research showed clearly that the best way to get out the vote was to mobilize people through negatives. So negative campaigning really started to kick in. The only problem with negative campaigning is that each time you run a negative campaign, the voters, their hide gets thicker, their skin gets thicker, and so the next time round has to be more intense and more over the top. And eventually you build a a political system that can only be operationalized through fear and hatred. And that's where we've gotten to now. And it's very hard to bring it back from there until it comes to a screeching halt and falls apart and forces people to reevaluate how it is that they've arrived at this point. And so that was 29 years ago when I was speaking with pollsters from both sides of the political fence in the United States, as well as researchers in the space, observing what they believed was the peak of negative campaigning. But of course, with the benefit of 29 years of hindsight, it was quite clearly only the beginning. And it's a very dysfunctional and unhealthy way in which societies ultimately seek to find solutions to their problems.
Yeah, it also destroys any kind of faith or belief in the political system. It makes people cynical and nihilistic, just by definition. You mentioned something in your article where you're talking about the proto-fascists, and just now when you're making the comment about the Reichstag fire, I think what is it called, the Enabling Act, where Hitler was able to effectively take power, or if you want, in an insurrection act of sorts, of being able to just kind of take power based on something that took place. Charlie Kirk, as you point out in your article, was this weaponization of a political assassination. And almost without missing a beat, it went into Charlie Kirk died. Oh my God, let's all of us be at the funeral ceremony for Charlie Kirk. We're going to have Trump, Hegseth, Rubio. We're going to have all of these people there. We're going to have Tucker Carlson, meaning they turned that into a political cudgel immediately. It was almost like right off the bat. It became, hey, this is advantageous to us, the fact that he was murdered. Let's now use this to our benefit. And as you point out, they could be anything. I mean, the Antifa thing is a really good example also. Antifa doesn't exist as a political entity. And yet you find all of these cultists who are online screaming Antifa, Antifa, terrorists, etc., meaning they're creating a context, true or false, by which Donald Trump can effectively act. I'll give you another example. On January 6th, there was a bunch of militia guys that were hanging out in Virginia with guns and everything else, loaded, like literally fully armed, ready for bear, waiting on Donald Trump to give the word to effectively attempt to overthrow the government by force. Trump never apparently said it, in which case those guys hung out in Virginia because it was illegal for them to have the guns and weapons and everything else in Virginia. I'm saying I think you're hitting on something real. I think you're hitting pay dirt with this, that there is an aspect of the society that is fragile and that is, let's say, on the balancing act, and it's not balancing all that well. Give me a take on that. I mean, the Charlie Kirk thing is a really good example of this, though.
Well, I mean, the research that I've seen, and there was a research paper published by the Cato Institute, which can hardly be described as the bastion of left-wing views of the world. You know, Cato's on the libertarian end of the political spectrum. But they published a research which actually showed that the sort of left-wing radical political violence paled into insignificance compared to so-called right-wing political, violence. Right. But the fact that facts don't matter anymore tells us something about the sort of fragile emotional state of the society at large, and this goes back to those comments that my blue and red colleagues and friends made to me, which is that America has become an incredibly violent place where each side sees the other as the existential risk par excellence. Yes. And if that is the case, then the emotional reaction, and politics is largely a question of emotional commitment, the emotional reaction that can be mobilized and then fed and amplified around singular events such as assassinations and even if they weren't assassinations, the deaths of important figures, can really fulfill the function of being these focal moments where people galvanize around a focal moment and channel their collective energies into these events to create a sense of belonging, right? That they are part of something. So this is filling gaps again, as other parts of the social fabric have disintegrated. The desire to find a place of belonging, I think, is an important part of how these sorts of quasi-evangelical political movements recruit and then channel the energies of its members towards whatever purposes they send them, to do. And when people are swept up in these moods, they will do things that they could never contemplate doing by themselves. They almost become liberated from the constraints of either good manners, polite culture, or their own sense of what they can do by themselves. And when you're swept up as part of a crowd in a mood, then people will do anything. And we see that when crowds go crazy, and even the leaders who egg these crowds on can easily lose control of them. And that, of course, is the flip side risk, is that these sorts of crowds get fermented, and then they link up across the country, and eventually they take matters into their own hands. Now, we've seen that happen before as well in the United States, when crowds of people who identified domestic enemies in particular took matters into their own hands, and that, of course, resulted in lynchings and other public demonstration events, right, which aim to send clear messages to people about the acceptability or otherwise of certain kinds of social behaviors and setups, and perhaps the United States is at that precipice once again. It's certainly, I think, increasingly dangerous, from a non-American point of view. We often now look at wondering whether America is a place that we can visit at the moment, because of the problems of the border security, because of the well-known searches of social media and all those sorts of things now. And so there is that sense of, what I guess I'd call a political violence that has enveloped aspects of ordinary day-to-day behavior. So the politicization of these, simple things, coming through customs, the act of having a phone interrogated and social media posts questioned as a basis of rejection from entry, things like that, I think, are incredibly unnerving for people around the world.
Yeah. I want to ask something else. It's funny. My ex several months ago was like, yeah, I don't think it's safe to come to America. It's like, dude, you're Austrian. You shouldn't have a problem. But it didn't matter, right? It's on some level perception, on some level reality. I want to hit something else that I'm actually rather fascinated by. Gold for the first time hit 4,000. Now, the question around gold hitting 4,000 is about trust. Does this mean, so what was her name? I think it's Arnaud. I think it's a he. Bertrand, I believe. He made the point of saying, when we see gold go up this high, this shows a lack of trust in the current, let's say, economic political order. And it often symbolizes a changeover in political orders, that people are effectively trying to hold their money in a place where they don't want that money to be lost, because they don't necessarily trust the political entities that are, let's say, the prevailing state of things. Is that true? Is that your take on this? That part of the reason that gold is accelerating to this high has to do with a level of political chaos that's not just in the US, but also in Europe. And people are trying to find other places to put their money as opposed to, let's say, US treasuries, or for that matter, let's say various companies or stocks or those type of things, meaning they expect something to happen, and gold is their refuge.
Yeah, look, it's always worth bearing in mind that where there are buyers, there are sellers. So there are obviously people selling gold as well and taking the US dollars, right? So the US dollars is somewhere in the system. But there are people taking their profit by selling gold for dollars. I think some of this is driven by growing institutional accumulation of gold, and we're seeing that particularly with central banks around the world increasing their holdings of gold as part of their reserves. And that is in part a risk mitigation strategy, so that they are recalibrating their portfolio to introduce more diversity into it, reducing their exposure to certain asset classes which they deem may be of a higher risk than they might have even a year ago. In particular, treasury bonds, which were, of course, until probably about a year ago, still viewed by and large as the global risk-free asset. It's certainly not viewed that way these days, which means that if you've accumulated dollars and you want to cycle those dollars into other kinds of assets, the question is what do you do, right? So as, for instance, the People's Bank of China slowly eases down its holdings of US Treasury bonds, it still has US dollars. Right? So bear in mind that if it's not refinancing maturing bonds, it's taking the dollars back. So it's getting the dollars. It's running trade surpluses, so it's accumulating dollars. And the question is, well, what does it do? So what it has been doing quite clearly has been buying gold, buying other commodities. Where it can, it's been financing, using those dollars to finance projects around the world, particularly in renewable energy or clean energy projects, but not only those, other infrastructure projects. So the People's Bank of China is looking for ways in which it can diversify its holdings of liquidity into assets that that are useful and which will retain some kind of sense of value over time, especially whilst we are going through a period of such incredible financial system turbulence. The United States is really creating incredible amounts of uncertainty and risk in global capital markets, and consequently holders of finance capital are considering ways in which they can diversify their value holdings.
But I don't remember whose I was reading this from. I mean, I read so much over the course of a day just to do the show. But they were making this point about finance capital and industrial capital. Maybe it was you. I think it might have been your other article on this idea of energy production, that this belief that we can do multiple things at once, meaning we can bring back industries to the United States and the energy requirements for those industries. And we can have these kind of like AI and technical projects that also require huge amounts of energy. And that the energy grid of the United States is not sufficient to be able to accommodate both, and not just not accommodate both, the amount of energy they would need to produce. It's illusionary, meaning you can't do both of these things simultaneously. Go into that for me, because the article was fantastic.
Look, one of the really interesting things about the American economy over the course of the last 20 years is that whilst the GDP has grown, and remember GDP is a measure of financialized transactions, the amount of energy produced and consumed in the American economy has largely remained reasonably flat, right? So as an energetic system, it hasn't been generate any substantial growth, right? Well, and it's because a large part of its gross domestic product, its financialized expansion, has been through increased system liquidity, increased prices of services, which actually use very, very little energy. And consequently, we've had economic growth without energy systems growth, right? Now, we've got this situation where the Energy Secretary about a week ago said that the United States needed to create an extra 100 gigawatts of firm capacity in the next 5 years. Now that is, let's say, about 10, 12% or so of the total system, right, in 5 years. There's very little hope of that actually happening. Now, the reason why this is needed, incidentally, is because of the rapid demand of electricity coming from the explosion of artificial intelligence data centers, on the one hand, as well as an aspiration to reindustrialize. Now, reindustrialization really means automation, and automation is electricity intensive. The fact of the matter is that China's success in automation, being now the standout global leader in robotics implementation, manufacturing, as well as deployment in industrial systems, is only possible because it has an energy system that can cope with that. That's generating all this new demand for electricity. So America needs electricity for both AI data centers and reindustrialization. Over the last 5 years, the cost of electricity, wholesale prices in America has gone up 267%. And that's in large part because AI data centers is making greater claims on a limited capacity within the system. Hence, the Secretary of Energy says we've got to build more. The real question is can America build more? It certainly, in my view, can't build 100 gigawatts in 5 years. And that's because they're not financial constraints, really. If push comes to shove, the state could fund this. The problem is fundamentally material. So there aren't enough skilled workers to do the work that's needed. And it's not just building new generating systems, it's upgrading transmission networks. So you've got to be able to move electricity from point A to point B. If you don't have the right skills of people to work on those high-powered transmission lines, these projects don't happen. Now, typically, a high-powered transmission project in the United States can take anywhere from 12 years to 19 years from conception through regulatory approvals, design, build, to finally become operational. We're talking, somewhere between 10 and 20 years in effect for major transmission infrastructure, substations, poles and wires to actually come out of the ground. That's a problem. We, of course, know that there has been significant regulatory impediments, but that's not the only impediment. Even if you got rid of all the regulatory slowdowns that affect the speed at which these major projects go, the United States simply doesn't have enough of the materials needed, whether it's the physical equipment that you need for generating, for these new generating units, or of course the materials that you need to build the transmission systems. So the chances of the United States being able to do this is very, very low. Now, what does that mean? Well, as it pushes to do this, and of course it can achieve something, right? So it's not that it can't build stuff, but as it strives to do this, the impacts is what economists would call a Dutch disease, which is that a boom in one sector actually sucks resources out of all the other sectors. And as it sucks resources out of the other sectors by boosting costs, it makes all the other sectors less competitive. And so as electricity costs are ramped up, other sectors in the economy will confront higher energy costs or higher electricity costs, and households, of course, are going to be hit with higher electricity costs. So the dilemma, the horns of the dilemma that the United States finds itself in now is that it has dual ambitions around reindustrialization and AI, both of which require massive expansion of the electricity generating system and distribution network, which cannot be accomplished certainly without having much deeper cooperative relationships with China, where a bunch of this equipment comes from in the first place. Now, China, of course, is manufacturing all of this equipment, and it's got an energy system which has, somewhere between 40 and 60% buffer within its system, at any moment in time. So China's demand can grow into a system that's there ready to accommodate it without any impact on pricing. So now China is selling clean energy technologies around the world. And that's going to enable other parts of the world to become more competitive in terms of their manufacturing, which also has implications for American manufacturing's competitiveness as well. So these are just fundamental, real material dilemmas. These aren't questions of political will and ambition and desire. It's simply that there's not enough of the stuff that's needed to make any of these dreams come true.
Wow. Warwick, I'm going to put both of those articles below. Again, you are fantastic. Thank you for this. Great breakdown. I swear, really good breakdown. Warwick Powell, he is adjunct professor at the Queensland University of Technology, chairman of Smart Trade Networks Group of Companies, and also president of Data Integrity Supply Chain Association Incorporated. Warwick, you have a fantastic rest of your night. Thank you for this, man. Always appreciate these breakdowns.
Great to be with you, Jamal.
Be safe. All right, well, let's go to our next guest. I see him in the background. The man, the legend, Ted Rall. How you doing, Ted? You doing okay this morning?
I'm good, Jamal. How are you?
I am doing well. I am not doing bad at all. Ted Rall, political cartoonist, syndicated columnist, host of TMI show with the great, the one and only, the fantastic Manila Chan. She doing okay? How's she doing, by the way? I haven't had a chance to talk to any.
I think she's doing well. Yeah.
Good. Ted, my government is shut down. What the hell have y'all been doing since I've been gone? It's like I left the country and all of a sudden it was like, all right, let's cut the lights out.
And you might not be able to come back because they're starting to close the air traffic control towers.
As they should. The notion that the air traffic control people work without getting paid is outrageous to me. It just seems completely outrageous. If those people just say, we're out, how fast would it be before the government comes to some consensus of getting back to work?
Well, no one should work without pay. I mean, it's I thought the Emancipation Proclamation addressed that issue a long time ago. It's demoralizing, and they're short-staffed. People are calling in sick. It's literally it's a public safety issue, right? I don't know if you talked about this on the show already, but
yeah.
As they say, if you're just joining us, right? I mean, it's really eerie to think that if you flew out of Burbank yesterday, you'd get a recording that's like, the air traffic control tower is closed.
Are you serious?
That happened yesterday.
Whoa.
Yeah. So a pilot was like ready to take off. I mean, you can still take off. There's a way to do it. They have to call like LAX or whatever. But I mean, come on. Burbank's a real airport. I mean, it didn't used to be, but it is now. Even if it's named after Bob Hope.
Wait a minute. Are you telling me that there was nobody at the tower effectively was off?
That's literally that's what that happened.
That's mind-blowing.
At least one pilot reported. There's a recording online of getting the, sorry, we stepped away. No one's available. Operators are busy serving other customers. Please stand by. Your
Can you
call
imagine
will be
that?
recorded for quality assurance purposes.
That's right. Oh, that is not good. That is not good.
No.
That is unfortunate. I want to show you Hakeem Jeffries. Hakeem Jeffries came out.
Must you?
Yes, I unfortunately I must, because somebody made him political opposition. The man has zero charisma. I got to be honest, I don't even know why the Democrats are there. And I don't mean this in a sense of, yes, you should be opposition to Trump. But when you don't have political power, your opposition is your ideas. This is our idea. This is what we want to do. This is, a contrast to what the government is doing. And yeah, you need to be more aggressive about it because you're dealing with Trump. But there's none of that. I want to get your take on why, but I want to get your take on this first. Listen to what Jeffries says here.
Great.
And I think Jeffries is going to be waiting a very long time if he's waiting for Donald Trump to pick up the phone and give him a call.
Seem to suggest that Boyd said something to the effect of, we're talking to Democrats. So A, have you had any conversations as of late with the president or the White House? And B, what do you make of his willingness maybe to strike a deal here?
Well, the White House has gone radio silent since the Oval Office meeting last Monday, and neither Leader Schumer or myself have heard a word from the administration about resolving this issue, making clear to us that the White House wanted to shut the government down, to continue the chaos that they've been inflicting on the American people since day one of this presidency. It's an interesting statement that the president has made, and I think both House and Senate Democrats are clear. We'll sit down anytime, any place with anyone from your administration, including the president, to get a resolution here. with respect to the Affordable Care Act tax credits, which need to be extended right now, as well as dealing with and addressing the Republican healthcare crisis.
I hate all of these people, Ted. I swear to God, I do. They need to change his
Step
batteries.
aside. You're gonna have to share that hatred with me.
Yeah, change his
so-
batteries for one.
So
And he
Jeffrey-
makes me wish for Nancy Pelosi, of all people, for God's
Oh,
sake. Like, he's
well,
that bad.
Jeffrey's
Give me
doing-
your take on this. He's making the argument that Donald Trump hasn't called me. Nobody has talked to me. We need to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. Give me your thoughts.
Well, he sounds like my late mom. You never call, you never write. Look, the thing is, the Democratic messaging here is just completely atrocious. Notice that he buried the lead. What the Democrats' point here, and it is actually an important point that affects tens of millions of Americans who rely on the Affordable Care Act for insurance, is that the entire insurance system is going to collapse unless these subsidies are renewed. And that, basically people are going to be kicked out of the system, never to be seen again, not next year, not ever. And we're going to go back to the status quo as it was pre-2010, right? So and most people don't want that. The Obamacare is very popular and necessary. It's a deeply flawed program, but it beats the alternative of having nothing at all, which is what the Republicans have. So, but that's buried, right? I mean, and it's buried under a pile of bullshit. The idea that, like, first of all, the Republicans wanted this shutdown. I mean, that's not true. The Republicans didn't want the shutdown. They wanted the continuing resolution to pass. And anybody who follows the news at all knows that's true, right? So, so right out of the gate, he loses credibility, which is really frustrating when you're in a position. Basically, the Democrats are currently ahead in the polls when it comes to the shutdown. The American people are on their side. They're blaming the Republicans. So they're literally, snatching defeat from the jaws of victory here. The Democrats are popular. The American people basically support this, but there's no messaging. So, there has not been in this whole controversy over the shutdown in the last 5 days a single ad, at least that I've known of, that I've seen on the internet or on cable news, that says, from a Democratic aligned group that says the Republican Party doesn't care if you don't have health care. They don't care if your mother dies of ass cancer. Republicans hate your mom. Call your congressman, 1-800 fuck you. And they're not doing that. There's literally no messaging that's coherent here to say we are trying to save hundreds of thousands of lives. The Republicans are trying to murder Americans en masse by denying them health care next year.
Yes.
They should all be out there, all 220 or whatever, 18 members, Democratic members of the House, all 47, 43 members of the Senate. Every Democrat should be out there saying that everywhere. I don't understand why they can't do that. They're like, well, they don't. The Republicans don't call us, and it's like they don't want to negotiate. And like they could say, listen, we're trying to fight for the American people and save their health care. We call the president all the time. He doesn't return our calls. That's okay. You can say that. But this shutdown. I mean, look, I don't think the Democrats care about our health care either. But it's the only legislative achievement they've had of any note in 30 years. So they have to protect it, because otherwise they're even in a deeper pit of hell than they are now. So that's why they're shutting down the government. But they can't fucking explain it to the American people. And it's very frustrating to me. It reminds me of, Democrats have this issue. I mean, the best communicator they have is Bernie Sanders, and even he was not able to articulate during his 2 campaigns exactly why overall you'd be better off financially under Medicare for all. Very simple. Your taxes will go up a little, but your health care costs will go down much more than that. Therefore, you'll be ahead. That's not complicated. He couldn't explain that. And I don't know why. It's the same thing here. I mean, it's like they're not trying, I mean, they're the Washington Generals.
They don't care. I mean, like, if you care about something, you bite, spit, fingernails. It's like
Yeah.
if you're trying to save something that you
Well, they are. They're
legitimately-
trying to save the Democratic Party, but that's it.
I don't know if they are. I mean, like, look, I think intellectually they care about the Democratic Party. Intellectually they care about healthcare, but it's not.
And they can't even explain. I'm sorry to interrupt, Jamal. They can't even explain the deadline aspect. Like, in 8 days, here in New York and in 49 other states around the union, is the first of several deadlines for people to renew their health care for 2026. If they don't do it by then, with the subsidies in place, they will not have health care for next year. Millions of people will be kicked off Medicaid starting October 15th. And there's no going back. Congress can't put that, can't put Humpty Dumpty back together again, even if they want to. So this is urgent, right? And like, there's no sense of urgency from, you saw Jeffries. Did that look like a man whose ass was on fire?
No, that's my point. Like, if my mom was stuck under a car, I'd bench press that car, like Superman, right? In the comic books. It's like when you care about something,
get her out. You
fight for it. And that's kind of my thing, even in a political sense. It's not like, those old communists who were making those speeches and they actually believed that stuff. When they were looking behind the scenes, it was like, oh, these guys actually are true believers. These guys aren't true believers on this stuff. And so what you get is these robotic speeches. Do you remember back when, I think it was Mitt Romney was running, and they were running ads showing, I think it was somebody like Paul Ryan taking a grandmother up a cliff and then dumping the grandmother off the cliff in the wheelchair and then just walking back. And it's like, this is what Republicans want to do to your grandmother. That's an ad, right? That's a brutal ad. They're trying to murder your grandmother. They're trying to murder your parents.
Yeah. That's exactly the ad I would commission for them. I mean,
this is nowhere to be found.
Republicans like to bullshit about stuff that they don't believe either. Like, for example, that like Antifa is, under your bed, and it's Antifa is fucking your cat and all that. And like, but the point is, but they're much better actors. Antifa, they're coming. They're in our schools. They're like, it's like they're going to turn all of our children gay.
These terrorists,
these
murderers.
I mean, they're ridiculous, and you can see through it if you have half a brain. But at least, these guys went to drama class,
And they can repeat it and stay on message constantly. Even with us. But I think what Hakeem Jeffries is trying to do is the politics of shutdown. Who gets the blame? And so he opens up with Republicans wanted to shut down because we need you to believe.
Because he's like, don't fuck up, when you're winning. Democrats are currently winning.
But that's a temperamental thing, right? Like, I think you're better off winning if you make the argument that wins, which is why I agree with you. That you make the argument of, we're trying to save your health care. Do you understand that they're trying to kill people? They're 20-something million people that are going to lose health care.
And I would be running ads like, from 2017, showing Donald Trump, like, we will repeal and replace Obamacare. And it's like, well, Don, and I'd be like, Don, with a clock, Donald Trump, it's been 8 years. We don't think you're serious about this.
Yeah.
And during that time, X number of millions of Americans have died due to lack of insurance.
That would be smart politics. That is not what they are doing by any stretch of the imagination.
No, I don't
understand
why. I don't know if it's incompetence or, obviously you're right. They don't.
I just don't think they care.
Republicans don't care either. Republicans don't care about Antifa. You think Marjorie Taylor Greene wakes up in the middle of the night worried about Antifa? Like, no.
No, but I think they care about power. And they realize that they can weaponize certain things like Charlie Kirk's death, using Charlie Kirk's death as a leverage to say, hey, Antifa, meaning they can, if their objective is, hey, we're putting military on U.S. soil. Okay, we need justification to do that. Oh, I know we have Antifa as a justification, meaning they're running a playbook.
That's what they're doing.
Yeah. Democrats, their playbook was busted when Trump won. And they have not been able to put Humpty Dumpty back together again in any coherent way. And so you would think something that they're supposed to care about, like healthcare, which, it's almost like vestiges of them care about it. So they're like, hey, this is a good idea to lump onto. So let's lump onto this. But because it doesn't burn in them, you get robot Hakeem Jeffries with the charisma of a used tissue. Like, it's insane. Hey, give me your take on this idea of the shutdown itself. Who do you think is more leverage here? Because I don't think Trump cares that the public disagrees on this front. Meaning, I don't think from the Republican standpoint, I think Hakeem Jeffrey is going to be waiting for a very long time. He has no leverage. And even if he could say, well, look at the polling said that the public is looking at us more favorably on this. I would imagine Trump says, so what? They look at you, they disagree with a lot of stuff I do. So what? I don't think that he's going to get that phone call from Trump.
Yeah, well, not to mention Donald Trump's not running for re-election, right?
And there's that.
I don't think. I look. Here's the thing: Democrats have the leverage if this is if they engage in smart politics of the type that we just described. If they explain to the American people, and by the way, the American people understand this issue, so all they have to do is be reminded of it once. Okay, this doesn't require like a huge, profound campaign. But if they remind the American people, this is about healthcare. We're trying to save your healthcare. Republicans who've been trying to get rid of your healthcare forever that's what this is about. There's a deadline coming up October 15th, and that's what we're trying to save here. This is the only leverage then they have leverage. And really, truly, the Republicans will be in a world of hurt. But because that condition cannot be satisfied by this team of Democratic leadership, there's no leverage. And that's why this is going to drag on. It's going to drag on past October 15th. There's another deadline coming up November 15th. This shit's going to roll right up to and maybe right through the, whatever. This isn't a midterm election, but this little election that's coming up in November. This is going to keep going. Both parties have very little incentive to settle. The Democrats really can't. They really can't. If they let this go, if they vote to reopen the government, and then that means the Affordable Care Act is effectively crippled now and forever, they're dead as a party. They can't.
And by the way, the costs also is another thing, meaning healthy people are going to say, well, I can't afford these costs because Donald Trump has reworked it's like the cost arrangement in the way that
this
goes.
Is going to affect a lot. This isn't poor people. This is this is middle class people. Even some people who might consider themselves sort of upper middle class are going to be affected by this. Yeah,
they're going to be like, I'm out. And the cost of it is going to skyrocket for everybody else that remains on it.
Absolutely. There are families who make like $100,000 a year. They'll be affected by this. So so it's going to have a profound impact, and it's not the kind of ticket that people don't notice. They're going to see the bill, and they're going to know it. But the Republicans don't have any incentive either because they're really against anything that smacks of socialized medicine, and they want to kill the Affordable Care Act. And they also just, as a rule, basically Trumpism is all about fight, fight, fight. You never compromise. You go. Well, you might cut a deal. That's a compromise. But until you sit down to negotiate, that deal is done. Yeah. So I don't know. I think this will go on. The Democrats are going to get rolled as always. I mean, I do think if I'm as a student of history, I'd say the Democratic Party is facing one of its biggest crises in its history since it was founded by Andrew Jackson in 1824. It is in real fucking trouble with this.
Do you think that's part of the plan, to be like, let people see the bills? Meaning, because I get the sense that the party wants power without doing anything to get power. Meaning, I don't want to have to offer you anything. I don't want to have to bargain with you. I just want you to give us power and control. Mm-hmm. This was the Kamala Harris campaign in broad terms. This was Hillary Clinton's campaign in broad terms. It's her turn, right? And maybe the thinking is, well, when healthcare bills go through the roof, because if you remember early on, their plan was let Trump be Trump, and Trump will be so unpopular that people will come back to us.
Yeah, how'd that work out?
Yeah, I know, right? But if people see, oh my God, my healthcare bill has gone up, has doubled, has tripled, who do they blame for that? They're not going to
blame the fucking Democrats is who they're going to blame.
You think so? Why do you think they're going to blame Democrats for that?
Because they're going to say that Democrats were feckless. We were told that Obamacare, which didn't have a public option, was the beginning of a revolution in healthcare that was going to ultimately lead to a European-style single-payer system. We were told this was like a foot in the door that was going to get us further to where we needed to be. Democrats basically, you and I both know they never made any effort whatsoever
of
to
course not.
expand upon or improve, and the most we ever heard is defend Obamacare. Right? Biden said that we'll defend Obama. Defend is generally not an exciting political slogan. It's like sometimes, but not usually. It's like maybe Thermopylae. That didn't work out well either in the long run. So it's like generally, you want to be fight, 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 like the Trump message. That's far more appealing. So they're going to blame the Democrats. They're going to say, like, especially if Democrats give them 7 votes to reopen the government over all this, it's going to be like you voted to get rid of Obamacare yourselves. I mean, it's not really completely fair, but I think psychologically that's how it's going to go. Democrats will have no credibility. It's like they're basically, the experiment with Obamacare will have been a 20-year experiment. It'll be just like the U.S. occupation of Afghanistan. It's like ServPro, like it never even happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they should defend it like they defended Medicare. But I don't see how you're wrong. The other thing that I've noticed as I've perched at the edge of the world, looking back at my country with a certain degree of concern, to put it mildly, U.S. troops in the U.S. cities. It's astonishing. Now, this goes to the whole, what is it, Posse Comitatus Act, I believe is what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
And the ability for Trump to do this. Now, the judge had blocked him on this several times, blocked him once, and then he tried to go around it by getting troops from other states. And she blocked him again, effectively saying, you are making this up. Like, you have nothing to justify this. And yet you're continuing to do this. Stop. But what I don't think people fully get is that Donald Trump has control of DHS and all of the agencies and all of the goons that are in DHS, which was not around at the point where the Posse Comitatus Act was created. Mm-hmm. So even if he can't get goons from the military to effectively ignore the rights of Americans, he can get other goons from other agencies to do that. And, the concern here is, okay, if you're doing this within the first year, what does year 3 look like? It looks like you're trying to militarize the country for some kind of takeover. Give me your thoughts on this.
Or maybe that is the takeover, right? I mean, effectively a massive overnight expansion of executive power is what's going on here. I agree with you, Jamal. I think that the thing that's really disturbing, I mean, a lot of things are disturbing about this, but, first of all, why are they masked? Why? And I've been giving a lot of thought to that, and it's not because they're worried about being doxxed. I mean, that cannot and is not true. The issue here, I think, I would not be at all surprised if the next reveal here, and I have nothing to back this up except what happens in other countries that have veered into authoritarianism, is the possibility that we're seeing paramilitary embedded inside groups like ICE and other agencies like the ATF. In other words, people who are not government employees, maybe Proud Boy types, right-wing militia types, who are funded, out of a slush fund, of which this administration, has plenty, and pays people who are not official government employees to go and participate and effectively act as if they were. That would explain, the reluctance to have ID and to expose their faces. I think we're rapidly moving toward that. I mean, the factoid that I can't get away from, can't stop thinking about, is that by the end of next year, it's already funded, ICE will be the biggest military force on planet Earth. ICE will be bigger than
Is that true,
than
by
the
the way?
Chinese, the People's Liberation Army. It will be bigger than the army of the Russian Federation, which is by landmass, the biggest country on the face of the earth. It will be bigger than the United States Army, the infantry. I mean, ICE is, and the thing is, unlike the groups that I just mentioned, who follow a very carefully calibrated set of rules that are regulated by military law and also their own jurisdiction and all that, these people are completely unaccountable because they're unidentifiable. So, I mean, if an ICE person if an ICE whatever, I'm going to say ICE in
Goon.
quotes, we don't know who
I
they
just
are.
want a
If they
goon.
kill someone, I mean, who's going to be charged? I mean,
Nobody.
how can they be? We don't know who they are. And that's what this is about. And they've already started killing people.
And by the way, Americans, like
Yes.
a lot, like when they're snatching people, many of those people are just Americans. When they raided
Yeah.
that place, they had like Black Hawk helicopters and all of this
Yes.
other shit with them. And when they pull people
US
out of their
citizens.
houses,
Yeah.
those were just American citizens.
Well, yeah. I mean, think about it. I mean, I'm an American citizen. I was born in the cradle of democracy in Massachusetts. Okay, but like, I'm as white as they come. It's like if
They
they
would snatch you out
drag
your
my
house.
ass off the street, I usually don't have like my passport with me.
Exactly.
Who does? I mean, nobody has proof of citizenship, and I shouldn't have to have it, right? I mean, it's like the burden of proof that I'm doing something wrong or that I'm here illegally. That's on them, or at least it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
But the thing is that this is a move fast. They've learned from Elon Musk and the tech bros. This is a move fast and break things presidential administration. That's really what Project 2025 is all about. Move fast and break things every day. I bet they have Kamala's book is like the chapters are by day 15, day 16. I think they literally know today, tomorrow, Wednesday, October 8th, we will announce the following 3 items by executive order. And they already have those written out. The president's already signed them. The press releases have already been written. It's like boom, boom, boom. It's all scheduled. Just like a package tour. And it's like that's what's going on here. It's moving. Nobody can keep up, right? The media's been eviscerated. So even though at their best back in the 80s and 90s, when they were fully staffed, they still couldn't have kept up with this rate of news and processed it and all that. The opposition party is gutted and clueless and stupid and feckless and worthless. And then the American people, well, there's no resistance whatsoever. Ooh, we have a third No Kings rally scheduled for October 18th. Don't forget to bring your picnic basket. Tahrir Square is what, my friends are literally like, well, people have to work. I'm like, Tahrir Square, they didn't go to work. It's a fucking revolution. You don't go to work. It's like you stop everything. It's like, but we don't do that. So then, it's a disaster. There's no pushback whatsoever. The only thing you can hope for is like in McCarthyism, at some point, the bubble bursts. At some point, the spell is broken, and there's some kind of like, at long last, sir, have you no decency kind of moment where someone's like, some person, I always think of like, the discrimination against people with HIV/AIDS. Magic Johnson's like, fuck you, I have it, and I'm cool, and now you have to be okay with it. And everyone's like, okay. Yeah. It's like, poof, the spell is broken. Not okay to hate AIDS victims anymore. Well, if we have a moment like that, and I don't know, but I don't even know if we have the kind of popular culture that's unified enough to do that anymore.
I don't see it. I just don't see it.
Nor do I.
I think it all crashes first.
I do
whatever
too.
Crashes means. And maybe it needs to. Whatever that means. Ted, always love these
It's going to get uglier before it gets prettier. That's for sure.
Agreed. And that's my assumption. It just has to crash first. It just kind of harden your heart and just accept it on the way down.
It sucks. It's like, Jamal, you're a student of history too. It's like, I don't know how you felt when I first read, but whenever I'd read about like empires, like the Chinese or the Roman empires or the Egyptian empires, this particular period was a period of decline. Everything kind of just went from bad to worse. I remember just thinking like, God, 300 years, that's like 8 generations. That must have sucked for them. Here we go.
Here we are. Dancing on the way down. Yeah. Ted Rall, political cartoonist, syndicated columnist, co-host with the great Manila Chan on TMI, Too Much Information. Ted, do you guys still come on at 10? I want to make sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's right.
10 a.m.?
9 a.m. deprogram with John Kiriakou. 10 a.m.
Oh. Okay.
We're doing TMI with Manila Chan.
9 a.m. John Kiriakou. Hot damn. Another fantastic guest. By the way, John is awesome. Ted, You be safe, man. Have a good show.
Thanks. You too. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, let me go to my next guest. We have the one, the only Dan Kovalik. How you doing, Dan? Having
Good
a good
morning.
day so far? Good morning.
I'm
Yeah,
good.
it's early
I'm
for
good.
you
Thank
guys back in the States. I'm Dan Kovalik. He's an American human rights, labor rights lawyer, political activist, previously taught at international human rights at University of Pittsburgh. That's a complicated history, but in fact, I always put that there because you did teach international
I did
human
for
rights
12
law.
years. Yep.
Yeah. Let's try to have some fun on this one.
Okay.
Let's try to have some fun on this one. Sex pots for Israel. Sex pots for Israel. Take a look at this. This is the Young Turks played this clip. I'm glad they found it because it fell in line with exactly what I wanted to talk about today.
Even if you haven't filled out your paperwork just yet. Because remember, we were a people first far before we were ever a religion. Judaism was just a way of life, a set of beliefs and traditions that our nation followed. So that's why we speak a Semitic language. That's why when we pray, we face Jerusalem in our synagogue.
This is so unfair. This is so unfair. This woman is an influencer for Israel. And this follows suit with this idea of Israel spending. Here's another one. Sex pots for Israel. There's another one. This follows suit with this idea of these guys spending hundreds of millions of dollars. They're paying influencers $7,000 a pop per post. Think about that. That's so much money.
You can make a lot of money fast, man.
Man, I keep asking these people when I see their posts, like, how can I get in on this? I post about Israel all the time. Look at all the genocide. Look at all the people you're murdering. That's a post about Israel. How can I get in on this? They never respond to me. Here's another one, just to make the point. This was when Netanyahu was at that meeting, and all of these influencers were sitting at the meeting, effectively about to get paid. Come on.
This group that's paying the money, they did register with FARA, didn't they? I
Yes,
thought
they
I saw
did.
some.
Yes, they did. They had to register with FARA because they were getting
Which
paid
is,
so
I
much
mean,
money.
at least they were required to do that. But
And by the way, notice what he said. He was like, we need to effectively, in another clip, he points out we need to fight this war by different means, which is we need to effectively buy up the stuff. So they wanted to go after Twitter. Larry Ellison is already buying TikTok. So of course they're going to have blocks on TikTok now. CBS, Barry Weiss, who apparently couldn't get 60,000 views on a video she put out, but apparently it's going to be editor in chief at, CBS News, apparently.
CBS News? Yeah, no, Israel's taking over in a big way, no doubt.
Yes. Their plan is, let's just buy everything up. Let's buy people who are pretty for pay. Let's buy up the media. Let's buy up TikTok and some of these things. Because what they seem to miss is that there was no big media campaign against them. People could see with their own eyes what they were doing and recoiled from it. And so their idea is, well, let's just buy up all of these things, prevent people from seeing what we're actually doing. It's fascinating.
Yeah, no, well, they've lost the narrative war, haven't they?
Yeah.
And as you say, it was pretty organic how the truth about the genocide has come out. But they can't put the genie back in the bottle. They They can have all the beautiful influencers they want. They can't overcome the videos and the photos of destruction, murder, mayhem. You know, they can spend all the money they want, and it's not gonna. I don't think it'll make a dent. I mean, by the way, is anyone really influenced by influencers? I mean, people may watch them. I bet half the people who do hate watch them. Though I can't, I don't know that that's true. But in any case, it shows their desperation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's desperate. I mean, it is unfortunate that these people are that attractive who are supporting this nonsense. But it seems to be counterproductive, though. I mean, the moment that people realize somebody is being paid $7,000 to post something about Israel, the first thought that people have is, so you're getting paid also. And again, it's like you found sex pots for genocide. Like you're finding people who are supposed to say very nice things about Israel. In that clip, she pointed out, well, we're losing the Christian right, meaning this is our last bastion in the United States beyond other Zionists and other lunatics. And if we lose them to the likes of Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and Charlie Kirk, also, by the way, Candace Owens recently put out text messages that she was having with Charlie Kirk, meaning she put out the receipts where he's like, I'm being bullied by these Israelis. They're the worst image of what people say Israelis are. And saying, I'm not going to accept this, et cetera, et cetera. I'm losing all of this money because I don't go after Tucker Carlson, meaning they were effectively trying to use him also as an influencer and go after people like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, or somebody else who, let's say, push back on this kind of, hey, they're murdering all of these people. This seems to be impolite that they're murdering all of these people. Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Okay, Dan will be back. There's apparently technical issues. And to back up what I was saying about, you guys say you didn't see the video. I'm going to play this one more time while Dan is away. This is another pretty influencer who, there you are, Dan. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry about that. Anytime I get a call, it just kills the
same thing for me too.
Yeah.
It does the same thing for me. It's something like you have to put a setting on do not interrupt, I think is what it's called for.
Okay,
it does the same thing for me.
Next
yeah, the pretty for pay people getting paid all of that money. This seems very counterproductive. The moment that I know you're getting paid $7,000, it kills the argument that you're making to me. And by the way, I used to feel that with Sputnik. Loved working at that company. That company, best job of my life, hands down. Under no circumstances did they push us on stories, meaning the stories that we came up with was stuff that we wanted to talk about as Americans. By the same token, there was always this thing of, okay, well, you're just saying that because you're working at Sputnik, which always used to bug the hell out of me because it wasn't true. My point of view hasn't deviated from the time that I was there versus the time that I was here. There was no changeover. But if somebody says, hey, are you getting paid $7,000 for Israel to put that post out? Doesn't it kill the post?
Yes, well, yeah, once people know it, yes, it loses legitimacy. The other thing is, my guess is they're getting a lot of duds. That is, what kind of quality control do they really have, paying all these people all this money? I'm sure they get a lot of people that are not very talented, that don't do a good job. Again, as you say, it's counterproductive. My guess is at some point they'll just stop doing it because it's not going to work. Yeah, it's but again, it shows that they're losing, and that's good.
140. Here's another one. $145 million is what they're going to put into this propaganda campaign. Not to mention also trying to somehow affect ChatGPT to give out more Israel positive responses. Right here, foreign ministries, 145 million global campaign enlists U.S. firms, influencers, and AI platforms like ChatGPT to shape pro-Israel narratives online and counter growing criticism among young Americans. I get the sense, like, I don't know how you unring that bell. Like, even to this day, when people are thinking Nazis, they think Germans. And when you hear somebody like Mertz or somebody like that, people easily fall into this mindset of, I think that guy's a Nazi. Meaning 50, 60 years later, that impact of what you've done is still, that bell still rings. I don't know how they unring this bell. And I don't think all of these pretty people who they're going to put up is going to make any difference at all in regards to make that change. Changing the media, however, may. And maybe I'm making, and give me your thoughts on that. Like the idea that they're getting like CBS News, for example, or the BBC, for example, in the way the BBC would give this kind of biased media based on the people who were coming out of the BBC pointing out saying they had an obviously pro-Israel narrative, but we weren't allowed to contradict. CBS News is probably going to become something like that with Barry Weiss. Is this going to matter also? I mean, it's one thing to say social media. It's another thing to talk about mainstream media and whether people will accept, I guess, these nonsense narratives or these counter narratives that they're probably going to put out of these main media spaces.
Well, people are already losing faith in the mainstream media. The polls show that. I mean, so again, I'm not sure the CBS control is going to make a huge difference. I do think, depending on what's done with TikTok, that could make a difference. I think TikTok is influencing people. So,
yeah,
you know, and if they went after Twitter, YouTube, you know, that's where things are happening. That's where people are being influenced. So we'll see. But again, I don't think they can't control it all. You know, it's like holes in a dike. And by the way, I think they've moved on this a little too late. It's now 2 years into this genocide. And as you say, the images are out there, the videos are out there. People know what's happening. And even, you know, outside of CBS, a lot of the mainstream media is now finally talking about what's really happening. So I can't see that they can control this now. It's a wildfire for them.
There's something else that this pretty person said. And I know I can call her a pretty person, but that's okay. Right here, where she is, let me restart this clip. She points out Charlie Kirk. And it's wild to me that Charlie Kirk keeps coming up in these conversations because I don't know what Charlie Kirk has to do with any of this. Let me see.
Paper was how you and the Likud party are cut from the same ideological cloth as Trump and the GOP in America. And so specifically with Charlie Kirk's assassination, who was a big mentor of mine, my first mentor in the space, evangelicals, from all my research, evangelicals are the reason that.
So she's trying to, I guess, saying Charlie Kirk was an evangelical, and evangelicals are big on Israel because they effectively want to see Israel destroyed when Jesus comes back. Is that the link? I mean, like her fear is that the evangelical base, with the likes of people like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and maybe even Megyn Kelly on some esoteric level, are eating away and eroding what is going on in regards to their support for Israel, especially if you get Charlie Kirk wavering on that support. Is that indicative of other people in that community also on some level losing support?
Yeah, again, the polls show that evangelicals are starting to turn on Israel. I mean, they are Christians after all. I mean, you know, killing children is anathema to Christianity. I think we can all agree on that, right? We may not agree on transubstantiation and the Holy Trinity, but I think we can agree murdering children is unchristian, right? So again, they have a problem. They have a problem because the truth is so awful, right? That people are running away from Israel as fast as they can.
Can you give me a breakdown of what is taking place in regards to Syria right now? There was Syrian government apparently are attacking the Kurds, and the U.S. envoy to Syria, that degenerate, what is his name? Tom, I forget his last name. He is apparently going with the idea of saying, hey, we need you to not do that. What is going on with this? I saw this story yesterday. I didn't get the chance to delve further into it.
Yeah, well, there was always, you know, everyone wondered what was going to happen with the Kurds and whether the new government could live with them and whether the Kurds could live with the new government. And right. I think finally that bubble broke and they're on a collision course. The Kurds control, with the help of the United States,
yes,
a huge swath of Syrian territory. And the new government, the Al-Qaeda government, wants that. So, that's going to be a big issue. You could have some sort of civil war between the Kurds and the government. I think that's very likely. I think the U.S. may step in to try to prevent that because they're allied with both sides. But yeah, I mean it's a problem.
But if the U.S. is allied with the Kurds, who will the U.S.? I mean, let's be honest.
I think they
the US
just
has a
want to
tendency-
keep them apart. I think they want to keep them from going after each other. That's the goal.
But part of that is also for the U.S. to maintain control over that part of Syria.
Well,
It's
that's
been
right.
balkanized.
Yeah, and again, will the new government be reliable enough not to ask to reclaim that? We'll see. I'm sure the U.S. will bribe and threaten and do what they can to maintain that 1/3 of the oil-rich part of Syria.
How strong are the Kurds in this?
Very strong.
You know,
I mean, they're very organized. They have a strong military. I think a lot of people think they could take on the new government, that they could even overthrow it. And some people would like that because the new government is so terrible and genocidal. There may be some popular support for that.
But this also runs into trouble with Istanbul or Turkey and their support.
Yeah, Istanbul will go crazy if that happens. I mean, Turkey is very much afraid of the Kurds gaining any ground in Syria or anywhere else for that matter.
If you had to give an analysis of the power balance that's there now, and the reason why I ask this is, like, it's balkanized. So you have an area where, let's say, the Kurds, you have the government itself that is precariously holding on to some level of power. Israel has taken part of Syria also. So at the very least, you have three sides that are...
Turkey is taken apart as well. Yeah.
Right. So there are four sides that are effectively jockeying for power in this one country that seems to be somewhat unstable, especially if they're still going into military conflicts against elements supported by the United States. Will the U.S. dump the Kurds again? Or do you think they would actually, no, we want to defend the oil-rich area, so we're going to defend the Kurds in this situation?
I think, at least for the time being, they'll try to defend the Kurds in that part of Syria, but might be willing to make, some accommodation to keep the whole thing afloat. Because a lot of people do think the new government won't hold on to power. It's, as we've spoken before, the HTS group that took over power has 26 different factions, and those factions have factions. And about 1/3 of the fighters of that group are foreign fighters.
Right.
Who have no allegiance to Syria per se. They have allegiance to the idea of a caliphate, but not to Syria, and many don't even speak Arabic. So a lot of people think this government won't last, and that will leave a power vacuum for someone to take over. And I think the U.S. doesn't want that to happen. So unless they're the ones who determine who fills that vacuum, right? So they may be willing to make some deals. We'll see. It's a very fluid situation. It's a very volatile situation.
Basically, they rather keep this precarious balance as opposed to having it fall apart.
I think so. Yes, because they don't want the Syrian Arab army of Assad to take over, for example. And that's possible. That army still exists. Many of those fighters are in Lebanon, Iraq. They fled, but they're still around. They could return, and there's still many people loyal to that army within Syria who would be ready to act if they saw the opportunity.
Interesting. Yeah, I gotta be honest, I didn't know what happened to the rest of the Syrian army.
It
I thought they
melted
just kind of
away.
melted.
It melted
Yeah.
away. They weren't killed, and again, they lived to fight another day, and they might. I
So
don't think they could be totally counted out at this point.
how do the other regional players look at this? Like Iran, Iraq? What are
Well,
they thinking?
everyone's a little wary of what's happening in Syria, but they seem to have a lot of, they've gotten diplomatic support from everyone. In fact, I believe Giuliani's on his way to meet in Russia. Russia has made an accommodation with them to keep their bases there. So, and I think that's how all the other countries are. They're accepted as the de facto government.
But they know that these jihadists are going to be used for ends potentially in their own countries. Like, for example, for Lebanon, there's an expectation that these terrorist groups are going to be leveraged from Syria to attack Lebanon with the assistance of Israel.
Oh yeah, well, I don't think Lebanon is excited about them for sure. But most of the countries, yeah, they may be wary of it, but they also may feel if they're in charge of the government in Syria that there's less of a chance that they'll go wandering around, right? Just stay there, right?
Oh, I see.
But again, the governments may not be excited about them, but they've accepted that they are the government, right? And Giuliani came to New York City. He spoke at the United Nations.
He did.
They're the
He
de
did.
facto government for now. And the world seems to accept that.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. How did people get this so wrong? Like people like you and me were saying, this is basically all hell is going to break loose when Assad falls, and all of these people, ethnic minorities, are going to die. And yet you had some people cheering this on, thinking that, hey, this is great. This is Syrian revolution. This is uprising, and all of this other stuff. Missing the point that they were trying to destroy Syria for the last, 20 years, if not longer. This goes all the way back to George Bush. How did they get this so wrong? What were they seeing that we weren't, or what were we seeing that they weren't?
They were influenced by probably the most successful war propaganda program ever. You had the CIA at one point spending $1 billion a year, in part to convince Western societies at how evil Assad allegedly was. The propaganda against Syria worked. And Assad was painted as a villain, as a little Hitler, as Gaddafi was, as Saddam Hussein was, and even amongst, as we talked about it, even amongst many leftists in the U.S., people bought into that. So that propaganda campaign worked. It worked swimmingly. And so when Assad was overturned, a lot of people celebrated for that reason. As many celebrated the overthrow of Gaddafi. And again, Saddam Hussein. And we see what happened in those countries. And sadly, people don't learn their lesson,
That's terrifying. Because that means that you can whip up a propaganda campaign about pretty much anything.
Well, you can. Even look at poor Greta Thunberg. She was a media darling. She was Time Person of the Year. Now the mainstream press is vilifying her because she dares bring food and infant formula to Gaza, right?
Mm-hmm.
The press is totally turned on her. She's now an object of ridicule for many. It's not hard to vilify people.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose you're right. A huge propaganda apparatus. Dan, thank you for this. I really do appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Always my pleasure. Thank you.
Dan Kovalik. He is a human rights, labor rights lawyer, political activist. He previously taught international human rights at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. You have a fantastic rest of your day. You be safe, man. Thank you for this.
You too. Thank you.
All right.
See you soon.
All right, let's go to my next and last guest. a new guest for the show, which I always appreciate having new guests. Angelo, and I'm going to try this. Giuliano, is that correct?
Giuliano, yes.
Giuliano, excellent.
Hi, Jamal. It's a
He
pleasure.
is he is a geopolitical financial analyst. You can find him on Twitter at, I think this is Angelo China.
Angelo
in China. I'm sorry, Angelo in China. And you can find him on the Substack at substack.com/Angelo Giuliano. Thank you for this, man. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
There is something that I saw that was taking place on Twitter. And sometimes I'm always fascinated by the conversations that take place on Twitter. And one of those had to do with, you made the point of saying that there are the pro-Palestinian movement has been infiltrated.
Yeah.
Explain it.
Wait. We need to put some nuances here. Well, there are infiltration in a sense that when you look at the funding, it's because part of my work is following the funding. So
Yes.
who funds? Who has been funding? And you see that the strategy is to infiltrate, but also funding both sides. So you have George Soros. That is actually funding pro-Palestinian movements, but it's a whole strategy just to penetrate them and to basically do those people know? It's hard to tell, you see. But when you have conflicting messages, you have pro-LGBTs, you have just think about those pro-LGBTs and those woke that are integrated within pro-Palestinians. You see, are they representative of Palestinians? No, they are completely at the opposite when it comes to values. For example, that's just one single example. And just before, so you see, there's many have been working for the globalist agenda, including climate change, including, you see, Dan Kovalik just mentioned before Greta Thunberg. Keep in mind what she's been promoting regime change around the world. Again, I don't want to downplay what she's saying, but it's important to let people know where those figures come from and who propped them up. Those were not grassroots movements. Was World Economic Forums that backing them. So when you see all those pro-Palestinian movements going to they're showing. I even saw on the flotilla there was one person was holding a flag of Palestine and also another flag with the symbol of the Gen Z revolutions in Asia. So you see, and again, if I mention this, people will say, well, Greta Thunberg, she's working for, she's been mistreated. She's been, and Dan just mentioned before, right? And of course, I do agree, but we need to think more. She's getting exposure right now on all Western media. Exposure is giving her importance, and it's making her the figure of pro-Palestinian movement, which shouldn't, it shouldn't be. First of all, it shouldn't be a Westerner.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be someone that has other political agendas. She jumped on it the last 2-3 years, but you have conflicting messages on what she's been doing before and after, and everybody say, well, she's learning and she's been used and so on. What I'm saying is that people need to be skeptical, question, and so this is why you see. When you analyze the pro-Palestinian movement, I'm just doing it's not an easy exercise because I'm pro-Palestine, and people that might see, why are you criticizing those people? People are, we all fighting for the same thing. But again, you see, the strategy is giving a leftist touch to the Palestinians. You see, when people see the pro-Palestinian movement, there's a heavy touch, leftist touch. And when you see the pro-Israelis, there's a more conservative touch. Right. So what happened, and I'm really trying, I don't have the answer, Jamal. This is a work in progress, very difficult. So when I'm trying to see from the perspective of let's say a patriotic person, you have more globalists on the side of pro-Palestinians and you have more wokes. So
Yes.
this is a put off. Basically, people see that and they, it's a reptilian brain. It's like, oh, it's not me. I'd rather be with the Israelis. See, in Australia, they're holding Israeli flag and Australian flags. You see my point? You see my point, Jamal?
I do see your point.
To let people know, well, those movements have been infiltrated and they are shaping a certain perception. And a lot of people, when they see Greta Thunberg within the Palestinian movement being the figures that is promoted, even if she's vilified, but she's on all Western media. Well, it's a big put off. They see that, it's like, well, you know what? No, I might support the pro-Palestinians, but I won't join in a protest. It's sad, but what I'm saying is that I'm questioning things. And there's infiltration, there's proof, ample proof. George Soros has been funding pro-Palestinian movement. And he's not, believe me, he doesn't care for the pro-Palestinians. That's a way to dilute the message and control better. And make them somehow, in some ways, make them look stupid. Because when we have queers or LGBTs that are in those protests, half naked, that makes the movement being looking stupid. And people have their agenda too. They have their agendas.
Let me ask you this.
They never come to the pro-Palestinian movement with their own agendas.
Let me ask you this. Is it possible that Greta Thunberg is a dumb kid who doesn't have, let's say, the breadth of knowledge of geopolitics in the way that you have? And she sees, oh my God, Russia invaded Ukraine, that's bad. Meaning she doesn't know the background. She doesn't get it. She's a European, right? She sees something else like, oh my God, I don't like it. That looks bad. Meaning she's following a certain trend line in the way that Europeans and the way that quasi-liberals would follow. And she sees, oh my God, they're murdering babies. That's bad. Meaning in her mind, there is nothing more than a rat and cheese. And I don't mean to compare it to a rat. I'm just saying she sees something and she says, I want to be involved because I think that's wrong. Whether she knows chapter and verse of it or not. And so in her mind, it's they're murdering babies. This is outrageous. Now,
and basically, I mean, really, this is a good thing, what she does. She doesn't have the full, I just hope that, that she's being naive, she's being used. Again, we should welcome anyone that is supporting the Palestinians. Anyone, absolutely anyone. But it's healthy to have this conversation, and especially when you are putting in front. Right now, most people, what they saw in the last 72 hours, they saw Greta Thunberg as being the image of the pro-Palestinian movement. Think about it. It doesn't mean that they're vilifying her. But vilifying, it doesn't matter. It's how much coverage you get. If you don't get coverage, then you're not relevant. She's becoming relevant, and she shouldn't be the face of that movement. No, she shouldn't.
Agree.
Face of the movement. Who are the real heroes?
But just be clear, though.
Of course, the Fatila people, whoever joined the Fatila, they're brave. I'm not questioning. But the real heroes, if they were to choose a figure emblematic of that movement, it should be, that guy that was standing in front of the Israeli soldiers on a chair and firm. He's the hero. The kids on the ground, they are the heroes. But the face of the Palestinian movement should be Palestinian, not a Westerner. I'm sorry, Jamal. I'm sorry.
No. Just be clear. I do get that.
Have on the front Palestinians, not Westerners.
And I agree with you. It's like all things being equal. That should be the face of the movement. Those people who are the nameless people who've, been killed, maligned, etc.
Yeah.
Thunberg was already relevant. Otherwise, Thunberg wouldn't have been relevant. Meaning she was already a thing. Otherwise, she wouldn't be a thing now. It's not like this made her. She was made from all of those other weird, protests and whatnot she was at when she was 14 and everything else. I don't think Thunberg thought to herself, I'm the face of this movement. I think the media just latched onto her. It's not meaning, I don't think this is her. And God, I don't want to have to defend Thunberg. I'm trying to point out that the people who are, let's say, queers for Palestine, the LGBT community for Palestine, it's not about values. It's not like I agree with the values of the Palestinians. It's not that. It's I don't like these people being murdered. Meaning I don't need to agree with your values. if I think a genocide is being committed against you, if that makes sense.
No,
Like,
no,
so-
absolutely.
Yeah.
But you see, I'm making the links with those, let's say, woke movements because they're being funded by
Soros.
Soros, and Soros is Zionist. You see my point? It's just, and the
Even
image,
though-
you see,
Yes.
when you look at Palestinians, they are conservative. And this is actually, it's very antagonistic. You know, if you're really pro-Palestinian, you know who you should support. You should support Palestinians and their values and the axis of resistance, because who's fighting is the axis of resistance. When you look at those guys, you had anti-Assad that they are within the pro-Palestinian movement. It's very heavy. You have anti-Iran, you know, and so on. But again, this is maybe a lack of broader knowledge in terms of geopolitical knowledge. And again, you know, I find it healthy to question, but I'm not downplaying. Absolutely not, really.
Agree.
And I know many of my friends are supporting Greta Thunberg, and it's right, but it's healthy to question, just question, really, because there are too many movements that are infiltrated. And because maybe it's because of my experience in color revolutions, you see, on the surface, it's very healthy. You see, oh, this is, you know, there's a legitimate cause. It's the same. It starts with against corruption and so on, and then movements are hijacked. And this is why we need to be extremely careful. I'm extra cautious, but you know why I do this? It's not because I don't like this and that person, because what is at stake is far bigger than ourselves. People are dying, and I do care so much. And it's not about rivalry, it's about egos and so on. But I see how, you know, they are very sophisticated. CIA, all those NGOs, they are so sophisticated. Do you think for a second that they care for Palestinians?
Oh God, no, of course not.
Even Amnesty Internationals, they are whitewashing their image through Palestine. So they take a pro-Palestinian stance, but on the rest, they're completely hypocrites. Human Rights Watch, the same. So you see, they're using Palestinian movement to whitewash and to look good. So, but on the other side, they're promoting regime change, and they're doing the work for the globalists. You see my point?
I do see your point, and I do agree. Like these people can have very mixed wants. Like, and Thunberg is a really good example. She has supported all of these regime change operations, but I think, for me, I think I boil this down to people see kids being murdered in mass and on this ritualistic type killing, and as human beings, they say that's wrong. Meaning, we may have difference of agreements on Ukraine, we may have difference of agreements on Iran, on Assad, on all of this stuff, but these people a genocide is being committed. They're being starved to death. They're being murdered. They're being raped. They're being thrown into cages. And all of this is being done before our eyes. And so, a rational human being that has a conscience looks at that, regardless of the other issues, and say, that's outrageous. That's wrong. Like, and it's not a value issue. It's not like I'm pro LGBTQ, so I can't be against genocide. Like, it cuts across a huge swath of people beyond their own political ambitions and causes. I mean, you have a lot of right wingers in the States who think, hey, this is wrong.
I'm just highlighting contradictions. You see, when you look at, if you really dig into what is Israel, the function of Israel, and so on, this is about, you know, the British Empire that wanted to divide the Arab Muslim world, and they used what they called a foreign entity. 1907, the British, the British, they had this conference and they wanted a foreign entity, and then you had the Zionists that proposed where we can fulfill that. I mean, I'm just simplifying just to make it short. So, in reality, you want to fight, you want to be pro-Palestinian, you want to fight Israel, you need to know who's behind that. And this is an imperialistic project, globalist elites that and what the thing is that while you are consuming Coca-Cola, while you are getting money from Soros, then you are being pro-Palestinian. But you see the contradiction. The problem is either it's naive or it's Trojan horse. I want to believe they're naive and they have a good heart and they journey in. But You need to have the full picture. And this is why we need to raise the consciousness and give the knowledge. But when people hear me, if you take out of the context and you hear me criticizing, you'll be like, well, you have no heart. You are so selfish. Those people, they go pro-Palestinian and they want, no, I just, you see the contradictions.
Yes.
The real enemy,
and I do get your point.
It's not even countries. You see, people, if you were to analyze, it's not even countries. It's the countries are tools for those elites. They are tools. They're using countries to have a global control. So to oversimplify, even though it's good to go into the street, but at the same time, you cannot go into the street, but at the same time being financed and being used by the globalists. You see my point?
Mm-hmm.
And then also, I just mentioned before that the pro-Palestinians are some pro-Palestinian movements are funded by globalists, Soros, and so on, and we need to question that. I don't have the full answer. What's the strategy? But I have somehow an impression that it's to make, to have a fringe of population that feel that they want to reject that movement just because of the other fights they fought for. This woke image.
Oh, I see. Yeah. No, I do understand your point. Because usually it's more of an anti-imperialist stance when these people are clearly imperialists. Even if they don't get it, they are just in the way that the things that they support. No, I totally get it. Because the Thunberg thing shocked me. I was like, okay, she has all these other trash points of view, but on this one, the broken clock is right. And no, I get your point. It's like the people who are funding these regime change wars, these color revolutions and everything else, the same people who are now deciding to put money into the Palestinian cause. No, I totally get it. No, your questions are fair. I totally get where you're coming from. While we're on this topic, let's get to this plan, quote unquote, Donald Trump's plan that apparently every government around the world has agreed with, including Vladimir Putin. Professor Morandi, when he was at Valdi, he had the opportunity to ask Putin a question on Trump's plan and the fact that Tony Blair was going to be a viceroy over what amounts to a slave colony. And Putin was like, this may surprise you, but I think this is a great idea. And I think a lot of people fell off their chair. Give me your take on that answer and give me your take on that plan and why so many of these governments have just jumped in and says, hey, this is a great idea. Let's go with it.
Can you just tell me, I'm very curious, what did Professor Morandi, what was his position on that?
Professor Morandi effectively was asking him, like, Donald Trump has come up with this basically BS plan.
Yeah,
that is obviously going to be violated from scratch, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many holes in this thing, and Israel has.
It doesn't surprise me. I agree with Professor Morandi, but what you see, there's two things. One thing is those peace plans, they've been existing since 1948. They were hundreds. Yep. They breached them. It's just to stalling. It's just it's BS. It's pure BS. In reality, there's a game, the good cop and bad cop. I don't know if you noticed, but the good cop is Trump, and then there's the bad cop is Netanyahu, who's willing to do the scapegoat, just to look bad. And then you have Trump this is sounding like the man of peace, but in reality, they're hand in hand. And it's convenient. It's convenient because ultimately Israel is doing the dirty job on behalf of the US, And a lot of people, there's always this discussion, who's controlling who? Is the US controlling Israel and so on? That's wrong. That's completely wrong. It's the same elites that control both countries. It's not one country that controls the other. I repeat, the same elites control both countries. Okay? Now, I want to go back to something which is really important. And that is actually related to the approach. Before Dan Kovalik is mentioned that there's this recognition by Russia of the new regime in Syria, and the same as you see all those countries engaging with Israel. And in reality, this is the whole nature of the multipolar world. The idea is that you don't fight each other. The idea is you engage, and by engaging, you gain leverage. So what Chinese says is that look for what unites us and set aside the differences. But here you see, and this is a theory, but it's you see, the nature of Israel can exist as an apartheid genocide state as long as it is in a state of war, and as long as it can somehow justify to its own people and to the world, we are being persecuted. You know, this is the whole crybaby posture that started from the Holocaust, Hollywood. We are persecuted. We are always like crybaby, crybaby. You know, this Holocaust industry, because that's an industry.
Yeah.
Now, if you start engaging with Israel and there's no more enemy, even though Iran, they're trying to say, well, Iran is threatening Israel. It's not. Iran doesn't care about Israel. You know, as long, you know, leave Iran alone, and it will leave you alone. But you see, Israel, the way it is, as an ethnocentric state, apartheid state, cannot exist. Doesn't lose completely its meaning if it's not in a state of war. So peace for Israel, this is my take again, you know, but Israel would cease to exist as an apartheid state the day that it doesn't have any enemy, because it would just look stupid. It would look anachronic. Anachronic meaning that, you know, this we might have understood like 200-300 years ago, you know, but now in this day and age, when we have tried to define some kind of a basic human right of equality, you know, there's no slavery is abolished. Now we have this anachronic states, ethnocentric, genocidal. So you see, Israel cannot exist if there's peace. It's very counterintuitive. And by engaging, this is the smart way of the multipolar world. By engaging, you gain leverage. China will never put sanctions. And so you see, Putin, the philosophy comes from China, really, and it's very Asian. It's, you know, it's this yin yang, you know, it's no black and white. It's much more pragmatic. By engaging, you gain leverage. So even Putin is there's not confrontation when it comes to Syria. Why would you confront Syria? If you confront Syria, you have much more to gain by engaging than by doing confrontation. Even though you might not like the person.
Yeah.
But at least you put aside the differences you have. So Putin, what he gains access to his base. He doesn't need to leave Syria. And the same with Israel. It needs to be pragmatic. Let's engage with Israel. Israel, you can despise it or not, but the reality of the new polar world, Israel will have its function there. And it will be live and let live. Can we work together? Yes or no? But that's the reality on the ground. Multipolar world, the philosophy is you work with the reality on the ground. And I'm just going to do a link with what happened in Nepal. You see, there was a coup, there was a color revolution, and you know, some analysts they deny that. But you know, anyways, now it's obvious. You have most of the ministers they were all most of them were on the payroll for decades on the US aid and so on.
Yes.
So basically, that's a pro-US government you have now in Nepal. But Chinese ambassador, the first thing he did, even though he knows that this is an anti-China government. Well, the first thing is that you congratulate them. China the same with the Taliban. That's what they did. With Syria the same. You know. So that's a very smart way. You engage so you can gain leverage rather than confrontation. And that's the new reality of the multipolar world. And a lot of people will not understand because they still use Western lenses where we get confrontational because of ideology. Multipolar world is not about ideology. It is very pragmatic. Very pragmatic. It's about business. Business brings prosperity, and somehow if you have a problem with the country, well, you put those problems. That's why you have India talking to China.
Right.
We have border issues. We are kind of de facto at war, you know, small war, but we can trade together. And why not? And somehow through SCO, you have India and Pakistan that are going to talk to each other.
Mm-hmm. Did that work with South Africa, though, as an apartheid state?
Sorry?
Did that work with South Africa as an apartheid state? I mean, I know Israel has a religious component to the way that they operate, but
you mean China, or?
Well, just this notion of working with a country that's doing something grotesque.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
South Africa was effectively having Africans in an apartheid where you had a small white minority overruling, like basically ruling a larger African majority. How did the rest of the world engage with South Africa in order to get it to?
Okay. Well, you see, the multipolar world is about we need to use international laws. So China, whatever China will want to, has been going against Israel all the time, but legally. What happens that because the US and also its allies, the British and France, they have a veto power at the UN, and they've been undermining the UN. But always China, for example, and Russia too, they've been denouncing what was happening in Palestine, and they did the same with South Africa. But when it came to South Africa, you had the US that they didn't put the veto like they did for Israel. So you see, it doesn't mean, you see, if it's something immoral that is happening, well, China will step out and say this is immoral, and they've been doing that. You see, the recognition of the Palestinian state, I think it's 1987, something like this, Jamal, but at least 1987. You see all those countries jumping on the bandwagon, just all those countries, that just now, only now, they recognize the Palestinian state. It is extremely hypocritical. It's almost disgusting. It's almost disgusting. You know why? Because now Palestinian state is not viable. It's not viable anymore. Why? I'll give you many different reasons. Well, first of all, the way they fragmented the West Bank, it's completely fragmented. It's not viable. Now, there's an equal genocide. We don't talk much about this, but do you know that for the next 30 years in Gaza, the life will be not viable. You won't be able to plant vegetables. The sewage, all the sewage of 2 million people, everything has been destroyed. Everything is going to the sea. So that means that fishing will be impossible for ages. And it will take $50 billion for reconstruction. But for 30 years, people will live in a toxic environment. It will not be self-sufficient. They will have to live under the rations from the UN. 2 million people. This was part of the plan. So not only you give them low calorie, they are in starving mode, but at the same time you destroy completely the ecosystem. And nobody's talking about this. Talk about peace, but peace 30 years, for 30 years, even if there's a solution for Gaza, but for the next 30 years, people will be living in a toxic environment, and nobody talks about this.
If China and Russia are trying to use international law, and at Valdai, Putin made a speech full-throated about this notion of multipolarity, and of course, international law and classical politics will undergird the multipolarity. But we're in a space where there is no international law. I mean, I've made the argument, and I think I've made it successfully, even to people who are international lawyers or people who believed in it, that there is no such thing. Does a thing exist if nobody pays attention to the fact that the thing exists? If a tree falls in a forest, nobody hears, doesn't make a sound. This is kind of international law currently. And so
I'm glad we're going there, Jamal. I'm glad. This is so essential. I'm going to make the link. You see, the world order, all those entities that were created after World War II are Western controlled. And I'm going to give you a list. The World Bank, the UN, they're all Western controlled. They have the veto power. China, you know why China has actually a veto power? Because back then, after World War II, Taiwan represented China and was a US puppet. And Russia, the USSR, they hope to defeat USSR. So basically, the globalists and the US would control complete, have veto power on the whole world. So now you have all those entities, IMF, World Bank, the UN, and you have even like those supranational entities like the FIFA, UEFA, and so on. Well, just look at the Olympic Committee. They're all white guys. You know, there's not a representative from Asia or an African. You know, they're all white guys, and this is why they're accepting Israel. You know, they're not kicking out Israel from the FIFA and UEFA. So you see, so what happened? You mentioned international law. Because the US and the West has been undermining international law because they have de facto veto power everywhere. Name it, IMF, World Bank, they have veto power. They completely control those entities. This is why the multipolar world through BRICS and SCO, they've been building a framework that could be replacing somehow, if those entities controlled by the West are not reformed, they will replace. Why? Because in terms of population, in terms of GDP, especially purchasing power parity, they're much bigger. So you don't want to play fair. You control those entities. We are going to create our own entities, including banks. So when you analyze even the Olympic Games, they already have a similar games. I think it's the Asian Games. They're starting with their own entities. You know, the World Bank, they have their own bank. Yes. In terms of security, you have SCO, but they're not politic entities. So far, it's all about pragmatic. It's about trading. There's some security. The SCO deals about security, but SCO is actually transforming into an economic entity. That means that now, when you talk about BRICS, you need to add up SCO. So this is getting massive. So international law, well, they are starting to work without us. And in terms of economic finance, we see two different models emerging. One that is going to be backed by commodities, gold, that is BRICS. This is why we have gold, which is at all-time high, especially today. It's
4,000. It's at $4,000. Yeah.
It's touching right now. It's I have the screen right here. It's touching 4,000. Well, yeah. Because you know, it's not fiat currencies is things of the past. And now you have the US, which is planning, you know, you have Bitcoin. This is an escape strategy, Bitcoin, but a lot of the US debt is going to be recycled through stable coins. That's the whole plan. And this is why you had the advisor, Koriko, Putin's advisor, that actually exposed the plan of the US to debase the US debt. So we might have this multipolar world, which is going to work alongside this isolated collective West, because the collective West is isolated itself. And this club, when you look at the club, the Western club and BRICS, the difference is that BRICS is open. It's open. Whoever wants to join, you join. And you don't need to join. You know, it's not a political, you can choose what you need within that. But it's not about what you have in the West. West is about destruction of nation state on the long term. Especially we see that experiment in the EU, which, by the way, was created by the CIA. That's a project. The EU was created by the CIA. You have the two father figures of the EU is Jean Monnet and Walter Hallstein. They were on the payroll of the CIA. And by the way, Walter Hallstein used to be a Nazi, was the first president of the EU. The EU back then was not the EU. It was a corporation, in French was the SECA, which is a steel and coal.
It was a trading organization. Yeah,
it was a trading agreement, but that's how they started. But so the project of the EU, it's actually this is somehow something that you try on a small scale, but they have, the globalists have this in mind on a much larger scale. That means destruction of nation state and complete control by globalist elites, multinational corporation, you know, and in order to do that, they need to go through, you know, many different stages, including social engineering, because how you have people that love their country. You need to turn them into nihilists, slave labor, how can I say, just brainless consumers. I don't know how to be not too critical, but it's not. It's
you
not
can be critical. You can be critical. Brainless consumer sounds right.
It takes time to explain, but this is, this part of social engineering, which is not grassroots, that I criticize. It might sound weird for people that take me out of the context, but we're living that in the EU. And when you look at this, and again, I'm an immigrant myself. I'm so far. You cannot call me a racist, really. But I'm an immigrant. I have the experience. I'm Italian, and I grew up in Switzerland. I know what it means, racist, even within white people. But it was racist. I suffered from that, and part of my fight is because of I hate racism. Really, I've lived in China, and for 30 years they've been good to me, and that's why I'm good about China. So. What they do in the EU is there's uncontrolled immigration, and it's not about being good to people in the global south. No, we destroy the global south and we use them as slave labor, and this put pressure on local labor. In reality, there's a project of replacement, destruction of identity, but at the same time, this is a tool for big corporation to put pressure on wages. And ultimately, again, whatever posture I take, I always I go back to the class struggle, by the way. It's always like this. Geopolitics, we need to, and this unites a lot of people. It's a fight ultimately of the 99% against the 1%.
Yes.
If you see, we talk over and over about countries and so on and so on. But you see, if we were smart and we were not divided by all those tools, they put us into boxes. Those boxes, they say, oh, you are capitalist, you're communist, you're socialist, you are conservative, you are patriotic. And those are boxes. We should just focus on the class struggle. We are 99%. And what we have in common is that we want a decent life.
Yes.
You wake up in the morning, the first thing you think when you wake up in the morning is, how am I going to put food on the table? I want to put my kids to school. I want a decent life. I want to live up to 90 years old. I don't want to be sick at 70 years old. Yeah. Basic stuff. That unites the 99%. What they want to do, the 1%, is finding solutions to divide us. All the time. No, you're the Democrat, or you Republican, and this is why I don't like when they try to put myself into a box. You see, they call me pro-China and so on. I just did a tweet recently. I said, I love my country. I'm Swiss and I'm Italian. I love Switzerland. I love Italy. I am China friendly. I'm US friendly. I am Germany friendly. I'm all friendly. What I'm seeking is to unite people and stop all those divisions ultimately. And it comes back. I come back always to the same thing. It's a class struggle, and so yeah. I think this is important. All the rest is distraction. The color of your skin, everything. You see, when I look at do you think a billionaire who's black, white, or Asian? Do you think they're going to fight each other? No, they don't. They're billionaire.
They're rich. They're very rich. They don't care. Yeah.
Dividing us. It doesn't matter. When you have money, do you think people see the color of your skin or even your values? No. But that's a system of control. We are going to control the 99%, and we are going to divide them. And this is why I don't like putting people into boxes. And I see that game. Why am I sensitive about all those movements that are not natural? They're not organic. Those were pushed onto people. to divide them. And I mentioned very often the LGBT movement and so on, because it's blatant. It's blatant. You know, my generation, I would be surrounded by gays and queers. You know, it was fun, actually. It was fun, really. It was like, but who cares? And it was something that there was a mutual respect. Whatever happened in your bedroom stays in your bedroom. I was not, you know, who cares? You can be a pig or you can be conservative in your bedroom. Who cares? But you're not going to expose and to try to put your values upon kids and so on. But that, you know, and those are examples on how they are putting us against each other, because you have then conservative there, you know, and they use that identity tool. I'm just going back to, I don't know if you remember, when there was the Black Panthers, and you had I think it was the Proud Boys, but you know, the equivalent of the Proud Boys. And basically the Proud Boys offered the Black Panthers to help them to be bodyguards, because they came to the conclusion that they were
BLM. You mean Black Lives Matter or
Black Panthers?
Okay,
you know the Black Panthers.
Yeah, I know the Black Panthers. I don't know association with the Proud Boys. The Proud Boys, from my understanding, was a recent group.
No,
but
no, what I'm saying is that it was the equivalent of the Proud Boys. Basically, the white guys, you know, kind of, you know, white MAGA guys, kind of.
Yeah.
Of that time, I don't remember exactly the Boogaloo guys. I don't know exactly the name, but basically, there's a picture where they do a press conference and they united forces because they realized that what they had in common was they were poor people. They were poor workers, and they joined forces. You see, they were so wise already 30, 40 years ago, and now this identity politics came back to divide us. And this is why, you know, the racist ones are the one pushing their agendas upon us to divide us. And yeah.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that, I agree, by the way, I agree with the economic argument that most of this stuff boils down to the economy. The rich versus the poor, the fact that somebody is 1% and somebody else is struggling just to make ends meet. And I also agree that our commonality binds us far more than anything else. Like meaning, I have to put my pants on it the same way. I get stomach aches. I stump my toe. You know, all of us are human beings that care about how do we take care of our kids, how do we put food on the table, how do we live our life. 1,000% agreed. For some reason that gets muddled in the way that we engage, but I agree, that's true. Do you think that, and I guess this brings in political economy also, whereas a political party who is paid by those same 1% has no interest in order to put, let's say, economic policy that would actually deal with the real material realities of people. And so instead what they do is, you're black, you're white, you're gay, you're straight, you're Hispanic, you're whatever. Meaning they put these people in the boxes in that way because they don't necessarily want to deal with economic realities. And if you can make somebody deal with something that is very personal to them, like your identity, and you're being hated for that identity, well, that matters. That's going to be visceral in the way that people respond to it. Then you could get some level of political economy out of it without actually dealing with economic issues, which is what I argue has taken place in the US. I don't know about Europe, but that is definitely what's taking place here.
Well, the division is a system of control. You see, the problem is that once you get people to realize it's a class struggle, then they are going to focus on getting more on the table. I'm talking about disposable income. Those are, you see, Chinese, you know, when you go to, I've been speaking with Chinese for half of my life, and you talk to a Chinese and you say, oh, you have topics like freedom, and Chinese, they're going to say, can I eat freedom? Freedom? Really? Can I eat it? You know what I mean? Really? And he's going to be very blunt, very direct. He's going to say, money is freedom. You have money, you buy a passport, you can buy 10 passports, you can have houses all around the world. Why don't you stop talking about freedom? You know, it's about the real life. Be real, be real. The West is, there's too much ideology, way too much. way too much. If you take away all those ideologies, we are very similar. You see, same as you're going back to Israel, Palestine, Jews and Arabs and Muslims were living side by side until you had people that came over and they divided those,
Yes.
for hundreds of years, thousands of years. And it's the same, So it's a whole system of control because they don't want people to have this class consciousness. And the danger is, if you go to Cuba or Venezuela, they are teaching people about class consciousness, basic stuff. In the US, I don't know if you noticed, but you have Democrats calling Republicans communists and Republicans calling Democrats communists. And guess what? Most of them have never read Marx. They have absolutely no idea what communist is. I'm not saying, and even myself, Chinese, they for example, I mentioned before, they don't like labels.
Right.
They're not going to use communism in China. They don't use it. The most they might say, they might call, we have a socialist system with Chinese characteristics.
Right.
And they are so pragmatic that, you see, when there was the opening up of China, Deng Xiaoping in 1978 or 79, they were doing reforms and they were very smart. They used best practice policy. They went around the world and they say, they studied everywhere, the political system and the economic system. And Deng Xiaoping said, it doesn't matter if the cat is white or black, as long as it catches the mouse. There's so much wisdom there. So much wisdom. That means, why are we going to be stuck in one ideology, communism, that right now might not be the right one? Why don't we use capitalistic tools in the meantime to achieve a certain level? And they were very pragmatic. They needed transfer of technology and they needed funding. So where do you get that from? You get that from the US. So they started, adopting capitalistic tools, and also they played kind of the US thought that they were playing China against the USSR, but China pretended that it was antagonizing the USSR. So basically decided, be close to your friends, but even be closer to your enemy. That's what China did with the US, because it needed to achieve something very pragmatic. So you see my point. Still now, China is very pragmatic. It is going to use whatever tools it wants, but still keeping in mind that the ultimate goal is that you have, they need to achieve, and this is the tacit agreement between the government and the population. They need to achieve this global prosperity, this. And when you look at the metrics, metrics don't lie. Age expectancy, you have a high age expectancy in China. And all the metrics, 800 million people being lifted out of poverty in 4 years, everything is there. And you just can see infrastructure. You see in the US, you go into the US, there's hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, every single individual. So you are born with that debt as an American.
Yeah.
But you have nothing. Look around, you have nothing. In China, well, you pay your tax, but you look around, there's infrastructure. And believe me, when you talk to people, they are so proud about this. And the metrics, you see, we talk about the metrics in the West. Casting a ballot makes it a democracy. China, in many ways, is far, far more democratic. There's a meritocratic system, but in addition to that, one of the metrics that is the most important is the satisfaction level they have. And this is, I'm talking about MIT, Harvard University, we're talking about between 90 to 95% of satisfaction level. Well, try to do that when it comes to the West. Macron, or, even, they there's more than 50% that don't believe that in EU countries that we have democracies. Those are not democracies.
Yeah.
And when you look at the trust in the Senate and in the Congress, it's extremely low.
Yes, Pond Scum is more popular. Yeah. Angelo, thank you for this. No, I agree with you. I agree with your take. I mean, like, you can look at China and see the buildings and everything else. You can see the high-speed rail. I think it was a couple of years ago, there was a bridge that was hit by a boat that went errant in Baltimore, knocked the bridge down. That bridge has not been built or rebuilt, and is barely anything has been done with it up to this point. And you would imagine if that was in China, that thing would have been built by now. It's a different like standard. We've lost something in our capability of doing just basic things. That
it saddens me, Jamal. It saddens me so much because I do love my country. You see, again, counterintuitive. A lot of people, they might think, well, why are you criticizing the West and you're saying so many things good about Russia and China? I don't have pleasure doing that because I'm from the West. I love my country, but I feel that people in the West should have the information of what is happening outside, and we should try to find ways to better ourselves. It's the same, I wrote an article about this when I made the parallel in geopolitics in those countries, how they operate, to the way I try to teach my son. I want my son to better himself. And that means you need to, when you see other people, other kids doing well, you should not downplay their achievement. You should be inspired by their achievement. Well, the same when it comes to country. It saddens me to say how much China has been performing. And it's not my eyes. I'm talking about China should be good to Chinese, not to me. And when I talk to Chinese, most of them are extremely satisfied. But it saddens me because we could do much better. And rather than saying, oh, he's bad, imagine the kid is saying, oh, it's not so good, in downplaying others' achievement. While in reality, if you're smart, you do best practice, learning from best practice. You see, the best thing, and this is how we call personal development. It's very easy. You want to better yourself in life, you look around. Why should you reinvent the wheel and go through the same mistakes that others do? You look at best practice. Oh, this person, why is he so good in doing that? Now I'm going to learn from that. You're not going to learn from a loser, right? You are going to look for someone that inspires you and learn from that. And that's the message I'm trying to convey there to the West, is that we don't need to be like China, and we'll never be, and we cannot be like China because it doesn't fit our history and our values. But let's be humble and look for what China has achieved and what we can learn from them. But you see, the arrogance is what is killing the collective West, because we look down on those countries, in which, by the way, you see, people should learn about history. But what we have, the collective West being hegemonic, or being, the superpower right now, I mean, through the US, that's a historical anomaly that has lasted maybe 200 years. But for thousands of years, it was India and China for thousands of years. And people should be humble because, when you look back at history, the inventions and all the achievements, you see, Europe was extremely poor and backwards. And this is why Genghis Khan was not even interested to go to Europe, because there was nothing to steal, really. There's nothing to gain because it was so backward. So now we are so arrogant, and we are only, we are talking about 15% of the world's population. And look at all the metrics, GDP, everything is going down. So we need to have that wisdom to find a solution to get together, because otherwise we are going to hit a wall. And this is, it goes back to the Thucydides trap. You know, when you have emerging power, declining power, now we are at the critical point right now. Yeah. And how are we going to do that transition? Multipolar world and the US, multipolar world emerging, and the US, which is declining, and the collective world declining. Is it going to be a war, which is 80% of the time, 90% of the time it goes through a war? Or are we going to be wise enough to avert a war and somehow try to work together?
Angelo, wise doesn't register right now. Like, this is not JFK trying to maneuver us without a world war.
Jamal, I'm trying to be genuine, really. Ultimately, I want the best, really. You see, I'm 55 years old. I have, you see, I enjoy this discussion we have, but I'm just wishing that people empower themselves, really, and knowledge is power. Just get the information, because this is how we can be stronger and more united. And what they want us to be is people that are zombified by taking drugs, watching Netflix, and eating junk food on a sofa. Sorry, but I, you know, Jamal. Anyway, it's been a pleasure. But you know, it's good. I managed to keep a smile. But that's why I'm doing this. So going back to this, that's why I'm doing this. And somehow going back to how I want to teach my son is that, you know, be the change you want to see in the world. We need to embody that change. So maybe one day he's going to watch some of those videos, and maybe he's gonna, you know, he might be inspired, hopefully. But if we can be, you and us, by this contribution, by doing this video, we can make a change, no matter how big. Then we can define our life as being meaningful.
Yeah. Angelo, I have appreciated this conversation. I really have. And look, much of it I agree with you on. Be the change you want to see in the world. Agreed. Yeah. Angelo Giuliano, thank you for this, man. Again, deeply appreciate this, you joining me with this. He's a geopolitical analyst, a geopolitical financial analyst. You can find him on Twitter at Angelo in China. And you can find him on Substack at Angelo, I think this is Giuliano. By the way, is there anywhere else that people can find you, where they can find your reporting or your work?
I have a YouTube channel, but it's been kind of a shadow banned. But Angelo Giuliano, just type in Angelo Giuliano on YouTube. When I have time, I try to do that. But okay. That's pretty much all.
Thank you for this, man. You have a fantastic rest of your day. It's late there, so you're in Bangkok. It's late in Bangkok, so you be safe. Have a good night. All right. We have come to the end. I deeply appreciate Angelo. And yeah, I agree with much of what he's saying. I understand his take on Thunberg, even though I don't necessarily agree with the Thunberg take, but I understand where he's coming from. Basically, there needs to be a larger analysis of why people are doing what they're doing. And are these people useful idiots for power, especially considering the people who are dumping money into these causes, especially when the individuals involved don't have a larger, let's say, context on other issues. Basically, it seems like you're being contradictory in the things that you're supporting. No, I totally get him on that. And on the economic front, yeah, I told you, I am one of those people who look at the world through the lens of economics. I think, for the most part, as human beings, we are far more closely related than what we often proclaim to be. And I know that there's a religious element to it, and I know there's a racial element to it that sometimes interjects itself. But I have to, at the very least, I want to believe that that's a minority, that's not a majority, and that for all intents and purposes, it's about how can I feed my kid? How can I keep the roof over my head? How can I keep the lights on? How can I have a decent life? How can I have decent air and food, et cetera, et cetera? So no, man, I totally agree with on this. We've come to the end. We've come to the end. Let's go to the chat real quick. Jinho Choi, good day from Sydney, mate. What is this? My girlfriend said yes. Oh, you asked her to marry. That's awesome. Congratulations, Jinho. Congratulations. 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 Shout out to you, man. Shout out to you. That's damn good. That is damn good. This is Spirit Warrior. Give me control of the nation's money. I care not who makes the laws. Yeah, I remember that. What is this? Mayor Armshaw Rothschild, 1913, EB, private banking, started in 1914, World War I. Yeah, you're talking about Woodrow Wilson starting the Federal Reserve. Yeah, I remember the quote. Well, obviously I wasn't there, but I do remember reading the quote. It's like, I don't care who runs the country. I just need control of the cash. And the banking sector got control of the cash. Central banks audit the Fed. And for whatever reason, nobody ever does. Guys, I'm going to end this. I want to thank all of you. I want to thank all of you. You can like this content, share this content, subscribe to it. You can always support PayPal, Patreon, Super Chats, Buy Me a Coffee, Super Stickers. All of those things help support the show. You have my deepest appreciation for all of those things. My thanks. And I will see you bright and early tomorrow morning. Garland Nixon is going to be on the show tomorrow. So that should be good. And I think I need to set the calendar. Pierce Robinson, he's going to be on to talk about 9/11. I resisted that conversation, but after Tucker Carlson's videos, I have far more questions. And I'm far more open to the conversation with Pierce. So that should be really good. That should be really good. I'm trying to get Kofi on. Kofi was in Russia. In fact, I think he was at Valdai. So I'm definitely trying to get him on to have a conversation about it. I haven't been able to talk to him for a while. So that should be good. But you all have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you again for views, likes, shares, comments, monetary donations to the channel. All of those things are beneficial. All of those things you have my appreciation for. You all be safe. You be kind to the degree that you can be kind. And I will see you bright and early. Professor Jiang. Oh, I would love to have him on the show, Cherie. I would love to have him on the show. Is that right? Was that Cherie? Was that Cherie or Charles? I can't see the thing. That might have been Charles. I would love to have Professor Jiang on the show. He would be a fantastic guest. He will be a fantastic guest. Mind you, a lot of that would be either me listening or me disagreeing. I don't know which one. Depends on the subject. But the man is fascinating. He really is fascinating. It was Red Axe's idea. Oh, okay, Red Axis. Shout out to you, Red Axis. He would be a great guest. He would be a great guest. Part of it, yeah. And you know what? He's one of those guests that are fantastic because 75% of what he said you may agree. The other 25%, if not a little bit more, you disagree. And you're like, whoa, where are you coming to that? Like, meaning when you're talking to kids and those kids are just kind of like, yeah, man, okay, sure, whatever. You can put out theories. Now, some of those theories you'd be like, hey, that's fascinating. Tell me more. And others think like, whoa. Why do you think that? Why do you think that's happening? But no, he will be a great guest. He will be a really good guest. All right. You all, I will end where I begin. Have a fantastic rest of your day. You be safe and be kind. Have a good one all.